Mr. Edwin C. May, welcome to the Shawnryanshow.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Man, I have been looking forward to this interview for a long time, ever since you kind of popped up on my radar with Joe McMoneagle, brought you up several times, and his wife, Scooter, and eventually connected us, which I'm super thankful for. And man, I'm just totally fascinated with this subject, with remote viewing, ESP, Stargate. And so I want to say thank you so much for coming.
You're most welcome. It's a pleasure to find someone with the excitement that you already have for this discipline, because that's rare in this country for sure.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's a growing subject again then, because I see a lot of people that are interested in it. But,
well, you probably have heard the phrase that it's the work of the devil.
I've heard that several times.
Yeah. Just a brief anecdote on that. I had a contract from the Air Force, about $1.5 million, and a nameless senior Air Force official said, "That's the work of the devil, kill that program." And they took the money back.
Really?
Yes.
Didn't even want to look into it?
Nope.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because we're not the only ones looking into this, from what I understand. The Russians are.
Yeah.
Who else is looking into this?
Actually, there was a Hungarian fiction writer by the name of Arthur Koestler. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not. When he passed away, he bequeathed a huge sum of money to Edinburgh University in Scotland to do psi research. And when they first started that, they did a worldwide search to be who would be the first professor to occupy that chair, and an American won that search. Bob Morris is his name. And he moved to Scotland, and everybody was nervous at the university about all this weird stuff. But he became head of the British Society of Psychology, not parapsychology. He spawned about 100 graduate students in Ph.D.s in parapsychology. And then Edinburgh University wasn't, in fact, proud of this, and it was on the front page of their website. So it's an amazing school in Scotland today, even.
How many governments are looking into this? Are you aware?
Certainly the Russians are. Hungarians are, with not a lot of effort. There's a big effort going on in Brazil now, and in Rio.
Brazil,
yeah, and of course Scotland, and Derby in the UK, a number of schools. What is it at Greenwich University? There's a group doing work there.
Who would you say is maybe on the forefront of this?
Right now, beside our group, you mean? Seriously, I would say Edinburgh University. They're doing very, very good work.
Monroe? I'm sorry.
Monroe Institute? They don't do parapsychology research there.
I didn't hear what you said before.
At Edinburgh University, they're doing excellent work there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to dive in. It's, like I said, I'm fascinated. So kind of how I want to do the interview is we had spoken at breakfast about a kind of an aptitude test. Am I correct on that?
That's a good way to word it, yeah.
On if somebody may have capabilities.
Call it remote viewing.
Remote viewing.
Yes.
So it's an aptitude test for remote viewing. So I think that would be a great way to kick off the interview.
Okay.
So we'll start there, and then we'll get right into kind of how this popped up on your radar and how you eventually became the director of the Stargate program, which I got to be honest, I can't even believe I'm sitting across from you right now. So super fascinating.
Well, thank you.
But you know, everybody gets a gift on the show. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
So there's yours.
Oh boy, is it edible?
It is edible. Go ahead, dive in there.
I was just being goofy about it.
Go open it up.
Oh, okay.
Little something for the ride home. Those are Vigilance-Elite gummy bears.
Oh my goodness.
They're legal in all 50 states.
Oh, too bad.
And
I was hoping for
and they're made right here in the USA. So
fantastic. In Tennessee, I hope?
Actually, they're made in Michigan.
Okay.
Hey. But
Thank you. That's kind.
You're welcome. So we'll kick it off with a introduction, and this might take me about 30 minutes to get through because you have such a extensive background. So
okay, go for it.
Here we go. You hold a degree in experimental nuclear physics, the executive director of the Cognitive Sciences Laboratory, previously part of the ESP program at SRI International, that's Stanford Research Institute, spent 49 years studying psychic research. You were the previous director of the U.S. government's program to apply ESP to matters of national security interest, also known as Stargate. In 1996, you founded Laboratories for Fundamental Research, which is still active today, the author of over 90 peer-reviewed papers and over 300 technical reports. You've given public talks about intelligence collection at the World War II famous site Bletchley Park in the UK, presided over 70% of the funding, $22 million, and 85% of the data collection for the government's 22-year involvement into parapsychological research, accumulated over 12 years experience in experimental nuclear physics research, fluent in a variety of 3G and 4G computer languages, including F, Fortran, IDL, Visual Basic, MATLAB, SQL, and various machine codes. Traveled often to Moscow beginning in 1992 and has become friends with the U.S.'s former enemy, the KGB. I can't wait to dive into that. And your colleagues are physicalists, that is, consciousness is an emergent property of the brain and does not survive death. What am I missing?
No, not a thing. Well, one issue how Stargate came into existence, the name, because that was the last of about 7 or 8 names preceding it.
I've always wondered that.
Yeah. The one, I walked out of the Pentagon with a colonel who was in charge of all this stuff, and he said, guess what? We've changed the name of the project. It's now called Quantum Leap. And I said, do we have to? A quantum leap progress is the smallest possible progress at above zero. And Stargate was then born as a result of that.
Wow. Why did they change the name so much in the beginning?
Well, because these were unclassified names, and it's part of security to keep it secure.
Okay.
There was Center Lane, Grow Flame, and a whole bunch of stuff like that.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm nervous about this test I'm about to take.
Oh, don't be. It won't hurt at all, promise.
What if I flunk it?
Probably will. Most people do. Don't worry about it.
Oh, man.
Now, I want to give you a little background about it. When we humans, and I presume you're human, some of my friends are questionable that with regard to me, but most humans have multiple conversations going on at the same time in their head. Mm-hmm. You're worrying about the lighting and all that, and you're having a conversation with me. I'm thinking, well, gee, what am I going to do for dinner? And I hope this thing doesn't go too long. That kind of internal conversation. But it's not relevant for what's going on at this moment, so we edit it out of what comes out of our mouth. We all do that, and it's just part of being human. And so why not allow someone trying to be psychic to do the same kind of internal editing? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what a potential remote viewing target is not going to be. For example, if you get a mental image picture of your mother cooking a hot apple pie and it's cooling on the counter in the kitchen, please don't tell me about it, because there's no food in this target pool. There's no indoor sites by this product. There are no people here. There are no buildings. There are no inside shots and so on. There's no human artifacts like rakes and shovels and things like that. No transportation devices. All that stuff, if it comes in your mind, just don't put it down on your paper. Don't tell me about it. Other than that, it can be anything outdoors, period, anything.
So it only outdoor stuff.
That's right.
Interesting.
So that allows you, and it worked beautifully for us, to allow potential participants or subjects, if you will, to have that internal sensor, it reduces the background noise substantially and allow what psychic ability can emerge from the noise.
So so when I'm doing this, only think about viewing something from the exterior or that's outside.
Yeah, and I have a stylized interview with you about that to aid that. So I don't know what the target says. The concept is called double blind. You don't know what the target is. I don't know what it is. And in fact, when you're remote viewing, it hasn't even been chosen yet in the computer. So I can't clue you or cue you in some way. Well, maybe it should be a kangaroo riding a camel across the desert, except there are no animals in this thing either. So,
Okay.
That's the whole idea, is to just reduce the internal noise. Also, do not expect a multimedia extravaganza between your ears. Most people, even like Joe McMoneagle, say it feels like he's guessing sometimes.
Okay.
So it's not a vivid thing, which we'd like it to be, but it isn't.
Would it be better to explain the aptitude test before I take it or after?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I would like to talk about what I'm about to do.
Okay, go ahead.
Or should we just do it and talk about it afterwards?
Let's just do it, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Here we go.
Yep.
Moment of truth.
Well, it's some moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do I close my eyes?
No. Hang on. Well, I'd like you to just write your name and the date and time anywhere on the corner somewhere. It doesn't matter where you put it.
What is today? Today's May 9th.
May 9th, and it's about 35 after noon. Now, like any kind of a job, I have to instruct you what it is I want from you. So when you're ready, I'll give you what's called the tasking, what I'm asking you to do. And it's very simple.
Okay.
Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. Shawn, please access and describe a photograph I'm going to show you in about 15 minutes or less from now.
Okay.
And the idea is to put down whatever pops into your mind first. Don't overthink it.
Whatever pops into my mind first.
Subject to the conditions we mentioned. And you can tell me as you write it in words or draw pictures or build it out of clay or whatever you want to do with it. Doesn't matter. So you're thinking about it. Don't think about it. Just respond to it. Talk to me.
Drawing what came to my mind first.
Which is it?
Should I tell you what I'm drawing?
You can. Show it to me even.
Should I keep drawing?
Well, no. Just
all right.
Capture what your experience is. Okay, that's a circle on top of a point. Is that what it is?
That is a pyramid with the moon above it. And then this is some kind of...
All right.
I don't know. I was envisioning some kind of like circular, maybe cloud.
Fair enough.
Above it.
Don't go into that detail.
Okay.
Suppose you could sit on top of what you call a pyramid and gaze out in front of you. What do you see?
It can't be animals, can't be any of that.
What does the landscape look like?
Okay.
What did you write?
I wrote a barren desert with a couple of dead trees.
Okay.
With no leaves on them.
All right. Excellent. Let's take a short break here.
Okay.
We'll come back to it in a moment. Interesting thing about a break is we don't want to talk about what your experience is or anything like that. We'll talk about something else, like what are you going to have for dinner? What movie did you recently see? Did you see, I don't know, did you see the Oppenheimer movie at all? That was a strange movie. Don't go.
Okay.
I can tell you
Is this the Civil War movie?
No. This is over the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer built the atomic bomb.
Oh, yeah. I can't believe I just See, I'm not letting go of what I'm... All right.
So when we're finished here, I'll give you a link to a Amazon Prime movie called The Day After Trinity. And that is an accurate portrayal with the real people that did the work. It's an excellent film. Okay, let's get back to it. I'll retask you.
New paper?
Pardon, no, right, the paper's good enough. And I want to get on record by saying the interview procedure that I learned, that I'm using with you, to a great deal I learned from Mr. Russell Targ. He was brilliant at that job, and I honor him for teaching me that. Excellent guy.
Look around. War, inflation, recession. Did you know that many experts call gold the everything hedge? Gold often goes far beyond hedging against inflation or the stock market. It can potentially guard against today's wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, not to mention the great economic danger of a recession lurking. That's why gold just hit another record high, and central banks keep buying gold at a record pace. Join the thousands of people who have called Goldco their #1 rated gold company. Diversify your money with time-tested assets, physical gold and silver. Today, Goldco is offering up to 10% instant match and free bonus silver with a qualified account. Go to ShawnLikesGold.com or call 855-936-GOLD and see if you qualify to get your bonus silver today. Once again, that's 855-936-GOLD or visit ShawnLikesGold.com. Performance may vary. Consult with your tax attorney or financial professional before making any investment decisions. Today's show is sponsored by HelixSleep.com. Sleep, especially as you get older, is critical, especially that deep, comforting sleep. Go to HelixSleep.com and take the sleep quiz. I took it and was matched with the Midnight Lux. Helix knows that everyone's unique, so they have several different mattress models to match based on your body type and sleep preferences. Once you match, your mattress comes right to your door, shipped for free. When you receive your Helix mattress, you'll be amazed at how well you'll sleep. And if your back needs some extra TLC like mine, you'll love their hybrid design that combines individually wrapped steel coils in the base with premium foam layers on top. They have a 10-year warranty and financing option, so a great night's sleep is never far away. Helix Sleep is also proud to support our active military service members, veterans, military spouses, and military family members with exclusive discounts on promotions on Helix products. Helix is offering up to 30% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/SRS. That's helixsleep.com/SRS. This is their best offer yet, and it's not going to last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now.
Okay, onward. So, retasking. Shawn, please access and describe a photograph in drawing or pictures or words about a photograph I'm going to show you, say, 10 minutes from now. Go for it.
This is a different one.
Nope, same picture.
What if something different's in my head?
Write it down. Helps if you write words to help me understand the squiggles that you draw as well.
Okay.
What you got?
I got a house, which is actually a concrete house.
Okay.
A big pond.
All right.
And then just vegetation, trees.
Excellent. Okay, and now I'm going to surprise you. We're going to cut the session off now.
Okay.
Why do you think I'm doing that?
Exercise is complete? Because I'm drawing something completely different than what I did before.
Well, no, I'm doing it because we like, as humans, to fill in the blanks. Well, there's a house there, it must have XYZ on it, or that pyramid must be whatever it happened to be. So we'll call a stop to it. And I now do a look. The job comes to me. Now, the target has not yet been chosen. I have no idea what it is. So I'm going to analyze your results. Bear with me 1 second here, a little bit of homeworking here. This computer, oddly enough, is very slow. May I have the sheets, please? Thank you. Excellent. Okay. I say, I can't put words into your mouth. So, for example, here you say, you draw a building, and it's very clearly the shape of a building. So I have no trouble thinking it's not a kangaroo. it's a building. So you get credit for that. What I'm doing, and I don't want to get into the technical details, it's called fuzzy set analysis. I'm trying to encode what you said in a way that this computer can understand to do the arithmetic with look-ma, no hands.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. You've got trees. And we got this stuff here. And I'm not going to describe what I'm doing here because this is going to be public. And we don't want people to have to guess this list I'm doing here. This circle thing that you do here, what did you say here?
That is a body of water, a lake or a pond.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Pressure's on me, not on you. to do
I
this
feel
right.
nervous.
Huh?
I feel anxious.
If you're anxious, so am I.
All right.
I want this to work really well. Okay, now the computer goes to work by itself. What it means is it still hasn't chosen a picture yet.
Really?
Yep. Now, it doesn't pay any attention to what I put in there because that would be cheating. In other words, it would choose a picture that matched what you said. That's not happening in the code. It just doesn't do that. But now it's going to randomly pick the picture for us. This is a demonstration. The participant is Ryan. And this is trial number 1. And target B was the right answer. You'll be rather pleased about it. It's pretty good.
No way. Are you kidding me?
No, why?
Can I see it?
Yeah.
Well, lots of trees, big concrete buildings, and there's a pyramid on top. Where's the body of water?
Buzz off. Buffalo. Actually, the metric here...
Can I show that on camera? Would that be possible?
Sure.
I just want the audience to see how awesome my remote viewing capabilities are. So there it is.
Not bad for a first attempt, actually. Quite good. We have a metric called figure of merit. And the way that is, there are 300 photographs in here. This could have been any one of them. And we had a team of people, like 9 people, encode them in such a way that a computer could understand them. It's technically called a fuzzy set, and let's not go there any further. But that's been pre-coded. So what I did was to get a fuzzy set of your response. And then the computer does a Venn diagram, well, not technically, but something like it. It said, how close is your description? There are 2 things that it asks. How accurate was your response? In other words, of all the things in the target, what percentage did you get right? The answer to that question is about 53% of what you said was correct in the target. But that isn't enough. I went out of all the things that you said, what percentage of what you said was correct? I mean, see the difference? One is what percentage of the target did you get? And the other part is what percentage of what you said was right? I mean, maybe you said everything was correct. No. Actually, you said 52% of what you said was correct. So
okay.
The product of those 2 numbers is what we call the figure of merit. And when that's above a certain threshold, and when we use this to make money on the marketplace, that threshold is 0.452. Your number was 0.28. Wasn't good enough to bet money on.
Okay.
But only about 20% of Joe's is, or 20% of Angela Ford's are.
No kidding.
It's a very high. In fact, it almost never misses above when it's that good of a remote viewing. So congratulations, Shawn. I'm really pleased. You did a damn good job of it.
So what is this? So if I was, what would you have me do next?
Go on with the interview.
If you were looking at me to see if I had these capabilities, would that be let's move on to the next test, or would that be
yeah, but not
hey,
right away.
Thanks for showing up. If we need you, we'll be in contact.
Not quite. I mean, tell me why it would be a mistake to have you do it again right now.
Because I would overthink it.
Not only that, one has to ask the musical question, from where does the information arise? And my colleague and I have been worrying about that a long, long time. And that is, did you get it from looking into the future and seeing the picture, another precognition? And if you did that, but 20 minutes from now you have a different picture, how would you be able to sort that out in your mind, which precognition pays attention to it? No. So we only collect data with Angela Ford, 2 sessions a week.
2 sessions a week?
Yeah.
That fast of sessions? Wow.
Actually, the fastest one of our participants is a psychologist named Nevin. And I say, okay, please access and describe the same thing I just said to you. So he said, oh, there's a tree in a path. I quit. It was over in about 3 seconds of it. There's got to be something more. But no, that's exactly all that was there. He just nailed it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So I got a 50% on like a 53%, I believe you said, on the drawings, and a 52% on what I said was actually in the photograph.
Yeah, exactly.
So what would be a close the book, don't contact us, we'll contact you, thanks for showing up?
Well, if never on a single issue like this.
Okay.
Give you a hint. I don't know if Joe would like this, but it's the data. I have something close to 1,500 remote viewings done by Joe. And it's 5 pictures are chosen, only one is the right answer at each trial. And so there's a 20% chance of getting it right by luck alone. Mm-hmm. His score is 44% hit rate. Statistically, that's off the charts. But think about it. That means 56% of the time he blows it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And he's one of the best people we got.
Interesting.
So how was it? Was it fun?
I want to do it again.
No, I'm not going to let you.
I know.
We can do that. I'll tell you, I can do this. In fact, I work primarily through Zoom now. I've got a woman in Milan, Italy, who's a crackerjack at this.
No kidding.
So I do the interview over, and then she sends me the response by email, and I do the same thing I just did with you.
So is this some sort of a hobby for somebody like that, or what do they do with it now?
Well, what she does, she works with some people and finding lost people who have disappeared.
Okay.
And I think Joe probably told you that he worked for the Japanese on exactly that issue. Mm-hmm. But she does it for someone else doing the same sort of thing. Interesting.
Is this stuff still within government? I know that the project shut down.
I would love it to be, and probably is a good time to dig into that a bit. A Navy SEAL who will remain nameless invited us to try to restart Stargate. This was after Stargate was closed. And it never actually happened, but for technical reasons. But I think what's interesting is that...
what do you mean technical reasons?
The person in charge, I don't want to mention her name, it was an intelligence officer in Hawaii. And there were other reasons I wanted to put her out of business. So the money didn't come forward and we actually didn't do the experiment. But it turns out that the working class people, not the managers, like the intelligence officers, love this stuff. It works extremely well for them. That answers questions that couldn't get by normal intelligence means. The problem is we try to get it started again at the management level, flag officer level, kill it. They wouldn't take it.
Interesting. Can I ask when that Navy SEAL invited you to give the presentation? Was it recently?
Yeah, no, not recently. Probably 15 years ago.
15 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
So people ask me, do you think the government's still doing it? My answer is, I hope so, but I don't believe they are.
Okay.
And surprisingly enough, most of the money came under Republican administrations.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Why do you think they aren't doing it anymore?
For a number of reasons. First off, intelligence collection has drastically improved over the years compared to what was going on during the Cold War. And so it's not needed as much. It's often used in law enforcement. There's a book written by a sociologist called The Blue Shield, and when he analyzed the workings of psychics with police departments, and sometimes that's quite valuable. But in terms of the intelligence collection world, it's not needed as much as it used to be.
Okay.
Literally. I mean, it's noisy data. It should never be sole sourced. And I don't mind saying this in public. I was on a television interview show with on Nightline. And opposite me was Robert Gates, CIA director at the time. And the Larry King, I think it was the fellow interviewing me. They in the green room, they said, you should interrupt and make it really lively. And I caught this, the previous director, Robert Gates. My own fear was sitting there. I was going to call him Bill Gates. So I called him Mr. Director all the time on TV. And it turns out that he said there was no actionable single source. He used the term single source application that was correct, that was useful. And I said, excuse me, sir, you should never sole source information for actionable intelligence. We got into trouble that way, haven't we? So Larry King said, let's move on. And that's true. And it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to keep people coming back.
Very interesting. Thank you. Well, we're going to move into the beginning of your career.
Uh-oh.
But before we do, I have a subscription account, and it's Patreon. They are top supporters. They've been here since the beginning. They're the reason that I get to have this awesome job and interview amazing people like yourself.
Thank you.
And so one of the things I do for their extra support and love is I give them the opportunity to ask the guest a question.
All right.
So this question comes from John Paul. Excuse me. In your research into psychics and remote viewing, was there any indication of a spiritual or extra-dimensional connection that may have suggested that viewers are being helped by or connecting with other entities, spirits, watchers, or other beings that then transmit information and visual perception of remote locations back to the viewer?
No.
No.
Well, it deserves a better answer than that. It was a very interesting question. Those are important questions. Humans have been worrying about that ever since we scampered down from the trees. Those are really important questions. There's an idea in physics that says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So our approach has been just straight, hardline physics, physiology, and psychology and physiology. And these spiritual issues, however important they are, and it may influence people's reason to do this, but the question is that part of the mechanism by which it occurs? I don't think so. And the reason for that is if it's pan-human, what it means is remote viewers can be found in Beijing, China. They can be found in Saudi Arabia. They can be found in India, even found here in Tennessee, for goodness sakes. Oh, my goodness. In California, it goes across. There's no cultural reason this does not work. And that is very good, I think more than substantial evidence that it's a genuine phenomenon, part of the Homo sapiens species. And if that is true, and it's a big if, let's say, then it can't depend upon a particular spiritual worldview, because there are so many different spiritual worldviews, including having none. Most of our people are non-religious at all.
Fascinating.
Now, maybe meditation, which I don't think that I would go so far to call that religion, but way to quiet your mind. There are many techniques. There was a conference arranged by our colleagues in Brazil. It took place in Alexandria, Virginia, and there were 5 remote viewers and 3 managers. And what was fascinating to me, I went on for 2 days, we tape recorded the whole thing, that there was no 2 remote viewers that did the same technique. One person does it by dreaming. Another person does it like we just did, business like across the table. Other people have tried meditation. Other people have tried music, listening to that first. I mean, there are whole kinds of really bizarre ways. Doesn't matter. If you want to stand in the corner and spit nickels out of your mouth and do remote viewing that way, we're happy with that. Whatever works, works. And our job is to try to figure out what is going on with that. What is going on? And we can talk a little bit about that later on in the interview. Mechanisms.
I would love to do that. So what you're saying is that you think that this is species specific to humans.
Yeah. Now, not exclusively, but what that means is there isn't a culture in Central Africa, let's say, or in Norway that can't do remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody, any human can do it. Now, like any other skill that humans have, there's a spectrum. Some people are really dead on with it, and some people can't do it at all, and most people are somewhere in between.
So maybe we get into some history before we dive into your nuclear physics career.
Oh, dear.
But
okay, go ahead.
Since we're on the subject, but I had spoken about this with Joe and on the show here, and it sounds like, if I remember correctly, it sounds like he thinks the same thing, that this was kind of maybe we've lost maybe the majority of the species, or maybe lost is the wrong word, but we've lost the ability to do this, or at least we're having troubles accessing it. So if this is human specific, what's the evolution of this? And how did the majority of us, am I saying this correct, lost the capability, or at least don't know how to access?
I think I disagree with Joe on that. I see no evidence that we've lost it.
I don't want to misspeak. Yeah. So
now I'll tell you why. I mean, as we'll talk later on in the interview, I've done a lot of work with the Russians now. And there's a cultural difference between Russia and the U.S. One of it is that it was kind of a misnomer, in my view, that the Russians are non-religious. They're very religious. There are like 6 or 8 churches in the Kremlin alone. And Stalin attended one church each week through entire years of the Stalinist era. They're very religious, but it's the Russian Orthodox Church. And if you've ever attended a Russian Orthodox ceremony, there's nothing but mysticism. You go, there's no pews to sit there, you stand around, and the priest never even looks at you. He's mumbling something incoherent to an icon on the wall. So it's very kind of mystical. Whereas after Luther and the rise of Vatican II, what's happened, unfortunately, is we've taken mysticism out of the practice of religious things. The Roman Catholic Church can give the Mass in local language instead of Latin. And so my wife thought about this, and I'm digging into it with some colleagues, that one of the reasons ESP is so well accepted within the culture in Russia and not so here is that they're used to mysticism. And people hear, well, what do you mean? Take the mysticism out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, our work is not mystical at all. It's hard-nosed physics, physiology, and arithmetic. Fuzzy sets.
I want to reiterate, I maybe have misspoken, but I remember talking to Joe about how communication was, in early times, talking caveman times, that communication was a lot more efficient and deliberate than it is now. because in the conversation was basically saying as language came about, it took us longer. It takes longer for me to describe to you what I'm thinking and trying to convey to you at this moment in time but rewind, thousands and thousands of years ago, it was pointing, grunting, expression, and what he was saying is as we started to travel more and more in groups and safety, that we kind of and language was kind of developed that our thoughts and the way we communicated became less efficient.
Well,
And so maybe what he was, I should have listened to this before this interview, but maybe what he was saying is that because of the overcomplicated communication that we were developing, some of the other things may have slipped.
Well, remote viewing isn't so much about conversation. It's about action.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a fellow by the name of Rex Stanford, no longer with us, a psychologist, who invented a procedure. And basically, the bottom line of it was, if this is true, that it's innate to human beings, some are better than others, that we probably use it at a level of unconsciousness. We don't know we're using it. And I can give you a firsthand experience like that. I was teaching at City College of San Francisco, physics, and a colleague of mine was coming from the East Coast into San Francisco, and part of a convention in downtown San Francisco. It was before cell phones. And we had arranged that I'd pull up in front of the hotel at 5 o'clock in the evening, and we'd go out for dinner together. Okay, it's about a 25-minute drive from the school to that. And I'm thinking, well, to get there at 5, I've got to leave here at quarter after 4 avoid traffic. I said, I'm not going to do that. It's a big, giant pain. And I gave myself all kinds of arguments why I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. Not psychic at all. I'm sitting in my office, right? And finally I said, oh, he's going to be really angry. So I eventually showed up an hour late, pulled up in front of the hotel. He came running out of the hotel. How long have you been here? I just got here. Oh, thank God. I have no way of reaching you. I couldn't meet you at 5. So how did I do that? One explanation is I use my own unconscious psychic ability that we all have to maneuver through life more efficiently than I would otherwise have. And there's a lot of data to support that other than just my own personal experience. Pretty interesting.
Very interesting. Why do you think people like Joe are able to access this so much more efficiently and deliberately than others?
Well, you could train me, get the best high jumping trainer for the Olympics, and train the tail off me. And man, I can clear 6 inches, not 6 feet, no matter what. So some people have innate natural skill. Joe is one of them. There are a group of people who think they can train to almost an unlimited skill level, and you can't do that. You can only train to whatever the native skill level is. Why Joe had that and Angela has it, other people do. About 1% of selected population have a native skill set for that.
1%.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge number when you think about it. It's much larger than the number of people that can learn piano well enough to give a recital at Carnegie Hall. So our job is to figure out the answer to that question. I mean, right at the moment, I'm working with some neuroscientists in Brazil to try to figure out what makes the difference between Joe's brain or somebody like him and someone who can't do remote viewing under lab conditions. If we figure that out, we make a giant step forward.
What do they say so far?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet?
It's a very difficult problem. They don't even understand much of standard neuroscience. That's something as weird as this.
What do you think?
My colleague and I wrote a paper together and published it in what's called SAGE, which is a respected journal online, called Extrasensory Perception, a multiphasic model of precognition. In other words, we have a testable hypothesis of how this might work. Now, I don't know if you've heard the term synesthesia.
I have not.
Synesthesia, it's well known, about 4% of the population experience it. People who have synesthesia, called synesthetes, they see numbers and color. They experience music viscerally in their stomach rather than listening through their ears. It's sort of like crosstalk about various parts of the sensory systems in the brain, and that's been confirmed with a functional MRI and so on. So for all of our participants, including Joe and Angela, and they all have synesthesia, all of them. And that is a huge clue about what's going on. And what that means is in the white matter of the brain, there's a lot of communication going back and forth across the brain. And we posit, needs to be shown if it's true or not, that someone who is really psychic, like Joe, will have much more hyperconductivity inside the white matter of his brain than the average person will. If that's true, we're home free. So we're working toward that end.
Wow. Very interesting. How long have they been working on that down in Brazil?
2 years.
2 years.
We're just barely getting started. In fact, Angela and I are going down to Brazil sometime later this summer as what's called a case study. We're going to put her in a scanner and see how her brain is configured compared to baseline people. So we shall see.
I can't wait to hear about that. Well, let's dive into you.
Okay.
So, nuclear physics. How did we get into nuclear physics? What was the interest?
Well, I went to a boys' boarding school from 7th grade onward. So my sophomore year, I took biology, and I thought, I'm going to be a biologist. My junior year, I took chemistry. No, I'm going to be a chemist. Guess what my class, what was in my senior year, was physics. And that's goofing around a little bit. But the real serious issue, I've never had a good memory. And in physics, you don't have to remember as much stuff as you need to in these other disciplines. There's no complicated Latin names for stuff and things of that nature. And you can remember just a few basic things and derive other things that you need because you're pretty good at arithmetic. You don't have to remember it. And that's part of the reasons why I did it. I got interested because the toys were fun. Accelerators and high-speed electronics and things like that was lots of fun, and I was darn good at it.
How long were you involved in nuclear physics? Where did you
kind of graduate school, which I started in 1963, and I finally quit doing that in probably 1970. And I had a second postdoc. I was a postdoctoral researcher in nuclear physics at the University of California at Davis, California. And I thought, I was in academic world, and I'm about ready to go to my second postdoc appointment at the University of Indiana. And I flew to Indiana, and I told my prospective new boss, I can't do this anymore. The toys are fun, and I'm good at it, but I just don't care about the underlying issue, nuclear structure and nuclear reaction mechanisms, not nuclear power or bombs or any of that stuff. And he said, okay, we'll leave the job open for a year. And I said, okay, if you want to, but I'm done with it. And my father went ballistic. He said, we put all this money and all this education, you're tossing it aside. Well, I didn't actually toss it aside. I'm still using it, the techniques.
When did you work for the Rand Corporation?
Oh, golly. I was 20 years old for the next 5-6 years as a summer student. I loved it. I was in the Earth and Planetary Sciences doing atmospheric physics work at that time.
What is the Rand Corporation? Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's an organization. It's kind of a think tank based in Santa Monica, California, right on the beach. It's kind of a marvelous place to work. It's very theoretically oriented, and if I were a better theorist, I'd probably still be working there because it was so much fun and interesting. They do everything from upper atmospheric physics, which was what I was involved in, to mutually assured destruction during Cold War. That came out of the Rand Corporation, that whole idea. Or if all of a sudden Chicago left the map in a giant explosion, we would, according to the Rand Corporation, which was then accepted as policy, we would not immediately go to war. That might have been a mistake, a horrible mistake. But if it were a hell of a mistake, that's one thing. But if other missiles are on the way, then we go to war. And I thought that was a wise decision at that time. I loved it. It was good fun.
Were you involved in researching future weapons and things of this nature?
Under Stargate, yes. We wanted to know the answer, not the development of the weapons. More importantly, was remote viewing capable of sensing exotic new weapons? The answer to that short answer was yes.
Okay. So that goes into Stargate. Okay, there was a couple of loose ends I wanted to tie up there. But let's move into, so you gave up your career as a nuclear physicist. How did you get into, 49 years of research that has to do with ESP?
Very good question. My boss at the University of California at Davis was a guy named John Youngerman. And I didn't know anything about psychic stuff, never heard about it at all. And he came to me and he said, Ed, would you like to help me do this really interesting experiment? I said, what are you talking about? Well, there's a pendulum going back and forth, back and forth. And the pendulum had at the bottom of it a really very carefully designed, very silver good mirror. And the pendulum was designed, Youngerman did all this work, not me, I was just there. And it had a heartbeat period, boom, about one swing each second, okay? And we could use laser interferometry to know the position of that pendulum down to a fraction of a wavelength of light, very accurately. So it's a really accurate thing. And then we want to know whether people can concentrate on it, and by magical psychokinesis, mind over matter, could they either increase or decrease that swinging pendulum? That was the whole idea. The problem is it's sensitive. That means it's sensitive to everything. At the end of the story was we had probably the most sensitive Interstate 80 truck detector in history, which was 2 miles away. So we had to give it away. But I was like in my early 30s, 31 or so, and I saw an advertisement by a well-known psychologist, Dr. Charlie Tart. He did the definitive work early on altered states of consciousness. In fact, he was mentioned even in the movie called Altered States. And he said, well, there's a weekend seminar here by a guy named Bob Monroe, who I'd never heard of Monroe Institute. And, nothing better to do, I'll go and listen. They're talking about out-of-body experiences. Out of what? Huh? Out-of-body? You're got to be nuts. What are you talking about? So here's this 50-year-old guy up there talking about the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life, that he gets out of his body, and while he was out of his body, he pinched his girlfriend on the butt and raised a slight welt. I thought, oh, really? And he wrote a book called Journeys Out of the Body, which I'd recommend. I have it on my shelf at home. Read it in two sittings. And I thought, well, he's a businessman. I'm a physicist. I can do this if he can. And so I gave it a good college try for a couple of nights. Nothing happened, and I put it away on the shelf saying, oh, it's all silliness. Well, I was down at UC Berkeley doing straight physics on the cyclotron lab there, and I saw another flyer saying, the science of extrasensory perception. Is there science of ESP? Are you kidding me? So I wanted to go hear that talk. And that talk was given by a guy named Mr. Charles Honorton, who's no longer with us, I'm sorry to say. And he was talking science. Really statistics and what double-blind protocols, and I learned about that from him, and he became my mentor, actually, and got me into this field.
Really?
Yeah.
Where did you go from there?
He went to Edinburgh. We actually helped him financially to get to Edinburgh to do his Ph.D. He never finished college, but he was a very, very clever, smart fellow. And Edinburgh took him on as a Ph.D. student. And he dropped dead on the scene there, unfortunately. He had a congenital heart problem that took him away.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But your research, from what I understand, never ceased. So where did you go from there?
Well, I met Ingo Swann. Ingo Swann's a well-known artist and psychic, and we did some work together with Chuck Honorton at Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. In the Department of Psychiatry, in the basement, they had a parapsychology lab doing dream telepathy experiments. And that's been written up by the chairman of at Yale University.
What is dream telepathy?
Somebody's in a isolated chamber going to sleep, and they're monitoring movements of the eyes while the person's asleep, so you can tell when they're dreaming. Because when you're dreaming, you get what's called REM sleep, back and forth, back and forth. And so an experimenter would see on the chart that he's sleeping. He'd press a button, and somebody down the hall had viewmasters. Those things would click three-dimensional pictures of a scene, and they were supposed to project somehow magically that information to the person's dream. Then in the morning, when they woke up, they had the actual viewmaster that was used for the stimulus plus three others, and the participant had to decide which one was the right one. And that worked exceptionally well.
So the viewmaster was
It's a round thing like with little slide pictures in it, all of the same theme. And it's three dimensions when you look through it, and you click on it to the next view of the same scene.
And so one of those scenes would have been in their dream?
Not scenes, but one of the whole discs of the disc of a viewmaster was all on the same theme, but different views of the same thing.
Okay.
So there were different viewmasters with different scenes altogether, and the person had to pick out which one was the right one.
What do you mean the right one? The right one
one the person was staring through while the person was dreaming all through the night.
Oh, and that worked.
You bet, big time.
So you kind of came into this as a skeptic. It sounds like...
I'm still a skeptic, actually, with regard to mind over matter, so-called psychokinesis.
But you came in to the presentation to the Monroe Institute as a skeptic. Then you were really drawn to the science talk.
Yeah.
Worked with them, then moved over to this. Well, there
was one amusing thing, though. When we'd answer the phone in the basement of Maimonides Medical Center, we'd say, "Hello, Division of Parapsychology. May we tell you who's calling?" And that cognitive dissonance on the phone. What are you talking about? But that was really good research there, actually.
How long did that go on for?
Oh, God. Run by Stanley Krippner, a well-known name in the field, who's just turned 90. And Alan Vaughan. And Alan Vaughan introduced me to Ingo Swann. That's how I met Ingo, actually.
And so when you were doing what was it called? Dream?
Yeah, I was not involved in the dream research.
You were not involved in the dream research. What were they looking for? Say they made the connection. Okay, the dreamer is able to identify.
Yeah, now the question is how and why. And we're still asking that question. But what Chuck Honerton said, no researcher wants to stay up all night. It's a hard way to get one set of data all night because you have multiple dreams. Dreaming time over the night 4 or 5 times each. So and you don't get, as a researcher, you don't get any sleep.
Yeah.
So he said, well, what is it about the nature of dreaming that makes us seem to work? So he guessed that it's what's called somatosensory reduction. In other words, you don't feel cold or hot, and your body is in a very comfortable, relaxed chair. So he said, well, there's other ways to do that besides being asleep. So he invented something from the research elsewhere in Germany called Ganzfeld, meaning whole field. And what they do is they put you in, and it's an extremely interesting thing. They take a ping pong ball, cut it in half, and gently glue it over your eyes and shine a soft red light in your face. So no matter where you look, you just see a patternless feature of the same kind of color, no gradients in it at all. And do the same thing with your ears with very quiet white noise. So what you hear is shh, right? So there's no pattern. And what happens, it is bizarre as hell. I've been a participant in those kinds of studies. You know your eyes are open. You're told to keep your eyes open. And you know it's red. And all of a sudden, it's dark. The red experience vanishes. Your brain says, well, there isn't any patterns here. We give up. So it's a kind of altered states of consciousness, except it happens in 20 minutes, not all night long. And when that happens, then they do the same thing with the Viewmasters or more sophisticated ways of picking a target. The participant still has to choose which of the 4 possible targets is the right one.
So when the red goes away in the brain, it sounds like the brain essentially shuts down.
In that vision, yes.
Is the participant aware of what's going on, or are they completely...
No, they know they're doing a side experiment, but they don't know what's happening outside of their world.
Are they conscious enough to know that the red light is gone and react to it?
Yeah, I've been there doing it, not as a participant, just to experience what the Ganzfeld is like. It's bizarre. I know my eyes are open, but it's just black. What the hell's going on? Now, that gets to an interesting point for later on, because all of our sensory systems, the big 5 that we know about, there's more these days than we have 5, they're all more sensitive to things that are changing than things are not. So you're lying outside on a nice clear night, no street lights and what have you, and you see the stars. It's really beautiful. But what catches your attention is the satellite that goes over. Mm-hmm. And cops have blinking lights on purpose because steady lights are not as attractive as something that's changing. So that gets us to something more interesting later on about a mechanism, how this works.
Can we explore that right now, or would you rather
Sure,
wait?
why not? So we argued that if the S in extrasensory perception really is sensory, then the big 5 things we know is there must be something that works better when that thing, whatever it is changing compared to when that thing is not changing. Because otherwise, that's the way our other sensories work. Maybe the ESP sensory part works the same way. It does, and we found it. And that turns out to be something a little harder to describe, is the changing of the entropy of the target system. And that works extremely well.
Can you elaborate?
Sure. Best way to do that as an example. Entropy is a measure of chaos. And things that are, for example, if you put your water, which has molecules bouncing around in it like mad, and put it in an ice tray and stick it in your freezer, it freezes them. What happens is that's a serious drop in entropy because it's less chaotic. Now, there's a side issue here called the second law of thermodynamics, which I don't have to get into. If you reach behind your fridge, you know it's pretty warm behind a refrigerator. The heat that's taken out of the water to make ice is overly compensated by the hot behind the counter, behind the fridge. But nonetheless, that change of entropy, that's called, is what correlates with the quality of remote viewing. And there's no doubt about it now. We have 9 studies that all agree about that. So it says it is, in fact, a sensory system. Now, we understand how if you're looking on the beach and the sun is sinking into the Pacific, it is well known those photons hit your eyes and how that carries the information into your eyelids. It doesn't tell you anything about how you're going to respond to those photons hitting your eyes. You and I are sitting at the same beach. You start crying because you got engaged on that beach. I'm crying because my mother killed herself on that same beach. It's the same photons. So all that is generated internally with each human being. But still, in terms of the remote viewing stuff, the correlation with the entropy is gorgeous now. It's really quite well established.
You had mentioned 5 sensories. Sight, smell, taste, touch. What am I missing? What are the other sensories that you were...
Oh, the new ones.
Yes.
Echolocation. People can go and drive a complicated system on a bicycle and avoid all the accidents.
I just saw a mini doc on this.
Yeah, that's one. Magnetic field sensing for some people.
What is that?
To sense magnetic fields. In fact, they worry about, there's a power line over me. My sensory system tells me don't be near that because it's disturbing the magnetic field and I can experience it. Some people have that ability, not everybody. Not everybody can do echolocation. Not everybody can do remote viewing. It's like other human skills. There's a big spectrum.
Have you looked at mediumship?
Interesting door. There's two kinds of mediumships. Excuse me. One is informational medium. A medium sits there and communicates with a disincarnate entity, let's say, and you're finding out what that person has to say. Your old Uncle Harry passed away, and you want to ask questions about it, and so on. My way of thinking, if Uncle Harry was a moron during a life, what about the death experience wised him up any? But the question always is, it's really interesting. I'm going to take a small break here on the talk. There is a worldwide organization founded by Margaret Mead, a very famous woman. She was in charge of the American Society, AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science. And she inducted the Parapsychological Association as one of the affiliate members of that organization, and they still are part of that. So it's a very serious thing. And, so I was a member of the Parapsychological Association for years, and I went to the current president. I was president 1 year and on their board and all that. I went to this fellow. His name is Dean Radin. I said, Dean, I'm quitting the organization. He said, okay, what can I bribe you to do to stay for another year? And I sort of said, how much are you offering me? And he said, okay, we'll give you, how about the Career Achievement Award? I said, okay, fair enough. So the rules are that if you get the Career Achievement Award, which I got, that you give an invited talk at the next year's convention about all your glorious contribution to psi research. Okay. So I'm there in my coat and tie, and I'm behind the podium, and I said, look, you guys have known me for 30 years, and my contribution to this field is well established. Then I walked in front of the podium and put my hands on my hips, and I'll say, now, let me tell you what's wrong with you bastards. I ripped everybody apart, including me. I said, look, I'm a physicist. There is no way in hell I should be doing psychophysiology measurements. What do I know about that? I'll make all the mistakes that the people who started that made mistakes. And we are all amateurs in that regard, including me. We're wasting our time. I would never invite a student to get into this area until they get a serious degree in some other discipline. And I bragged a little bit, and then I said, it's actually something that's sorrowful, and that is I held a 20-year career job where I was paid industrial scale wages and benefits and vacation and all that sort of thing, medical care. And I had no other job at parapsychology research. And as far as I know, and it's been confirmed, there's no one else in parapsychology history that can make that claim. And that's pathetic. You need to have a way to make a living that way, or why would you do it? So I don't know if I can say this on camera, but I'll say it and then you can edit it out. I said, I've been studying, I'm a physicist. I don't know anything about psychology, but I've been studying Freud a little bit. And, dramatic way I did it. I said, I've discovered why women are not as good remote viewers as men. Well, that turns out not true. I just said that. And I hesitated. And I said, penis envy. And the whole crowd started laughing hysterically. And I said, that is the right response to stupidity. What I said was made up and stupid. Now, I'd like to know, how come you don't have the same response when you are pushing quantum mechanics as an explanation for this phenomenon? You could have heard a pin drop. That was the whole point of the thing. People came up to me, boy, we loved your talk. I thought they were dialing the Tar and Feather Company to come and grab me. And that paper's written up. It's been sanitized, so it isn't quite so grim. I can send a copy to you if you want.
Thank you.
Because it does raise an issue. There are three things that we don't know. No one knows. Number one, how long if you have a psychic experience, how long does it last? And that's really important to know. If it only comes in bursts of milliseconds, there's no point in putting in an MRI machine because that takes 10 seconds to do anything, let alone milliseconds, forget about it. And second one is when most particular good remote viewers do not have control over their remote viewing. In fact, Joe and I talk a lot about what opens this. Look, if we have access as humans to all space and all time, and we were cognitively aware of it, to use a technical psychiatric term, we'd go bull goose loony in a heartbeat. You'd just overflow of that information in your head. So the question proposes then, what opens that door to that vast array of information and what closes that door? We don't know the answer to either of those. One example of which, we did a study with Joe McMoneagle at Stanford, and we didn't get any result in the study. Part of the reason is everything that was happening to Joe psychically happened to him when he was pulling into the parking lot. He did not have control over that. So by the time we wired him up, the psychic stuff was over. And that's a serious problem. In fact, I sent back a $150,000 grant I had to study skin conductance in an MRI in Scotland with psychic stuff. And I decided I don't know who to put into the scanner or when. That's a waste of money. And I sent the money back and we reprogrammed it. These are serious issues, and I've got some experiments on the drawing board now to test some of them. But it's a real tough problem.
Back to mediumship.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Got diverted there. The other form of mediumship is called physical mediumship. And my colleague Sonali Bhattamaratwa is main person behind this with her colleague in Brazil, Everton Miraldi. And she found 2,500 or so documents dating back to the 15th century on physical mediumship. Now, it's all fraud. All of it. And what that means, I mean, not our views, this is in the literature. People are with top scientists of the day, including Michael Faraday, well-known physicist. And the other problem with it is it's primarily contained into one culture. Remember I said earlier, things are pan-human, it can't be in one culture. This is in the Spiritist community in Brazil mostly.
Okay.
And, they get pretty clever. Now, my colleagues down in Brazil have spent a rather huge sum of money to redo the experiments. And I kept saying, all you're doing is making better measurements that had gone before. And we'll see. But I don't think it's real.
You don't you don't think any mediumship is real?
No, physical mediumship.
Physical mediumship.
Yeah, but informational mediumship, of course it's real. In fact, Julie Beschel from University of Arizona, she formulated what's called the Windbridge Institute and actually wrote a chapter in one of her books. They now are doing grief counseling by using this method. You know, Uncle Harry passed away, and all of his survivors are grieving. So the medium gets in touch with that person, disincarnate entity, if it's real. In a sense, it doesn't matter whether it's real or not.
So I'm sorry. This is a little bit of information overload for me. So the two types of mediumship again are what?
Informational medium.
Informational
they
medium.
give you information about what the disincarnate, the survival of bodily death. That person is talking to the medium, and that medium is telling you what the spirit told her. Physical mediumship means creating things out of thin air, like ectoplasm, this weirdly weird stuff, or physically it was called table tipping in the early days. The tables would rise up, and it's all done in the dark. Tables would ride up and move, or table rapping. You'd hear people banging on the table. Spirits doing that.
And physical mediumship is what you're saying is...
That's what I'm just telling you.
It's all fraud.
I think so.
According to your research. You had brought up the magnetic fields, which actually caught my attention about people who maybe don't want to walk under power lines because it interrupts their magnetic field. What do they say about that?
It's a very controversial area. There's a woman I know in Moscow, Natalia Lebedeva. She did the definitive work on, if you hold your cell phone up to your ear, like a lot of people walk around all the time, is that radiation hurting you in some way? And the answer for her research, no. She got the Lenin Prize for her excellent work in science. She's come to visit me in Palo Alto. Interesting woman, very smart. She worked for an organization called the Institute for Higher Nervous Activity. It's like that. I don't know whether that's what she meant, but very competent. Whether or not there's danger for living under a power line, I really don't know the answer. I don't think anybody does. But a lot of people think there must be, and they choose never to live under them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about people that have this sensory?
Oh, well,
that don't
magnetic sensory, that's a real phenomenon. I mean, for example, if you have hemoglobin in your blood, which we all do, hemoglobin has a magnetic aspect to it. So it's not at all surprising that, in fact, homing pigeons get to where they're going because they can see the Earth's magnetic field, feel the Earth's magnetic field in their own blood. And some humans can do that also that are better at it.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Well, Edwin, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll get into your time at SRI. When I first started this whole podcasting thing, an online store was about as far from my mind as you can get. And now, most of you already know this, but I'm selling Vigilance Elite gummy bears online. We actually have an entire merch collection that's coming soon. And let me tell you, it is so easy because I'm using a platform that is extremely user-friendly, and that's Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. What I really like about Shopify is it prompts you all the things that you want to do with your web store, like connect your social media accounts, write blog posts, just have a blog in general. Shopify actually prompts you to do this. You want people to leave reviews under your items? You can do that on Shopify. It's very simple. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Shopify is a global force for millions of entrepreneurs in over 175 countries and power 10% of all e-commerce platforms here in the United States. You can sign up right now for $1 a month. It's shopify.com/Shawn. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Shawn now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. That's shopify.com/Shawn. This show is sponsored by True Classic. We talk a lot about everyday carry here, and one thing I've been looking for to round out my EDC is a perfect fitting daily driver t-shirt. True Classic is made with premium moisture wicking technology and looks great no matter if I'm in the gym or if I'm out to dinner. For a limited time only, get 25% off when you shop now with my exclusive link at trueclassictees.com/SRS. True Classic shirts are designed to accentuate your best features no matter what your body type. Tighter in the arms and chest, but with the perfect amount of room in your midsection. You can't go wrong in a True Classic. The best part? True Classic sells their premium products and packs to help you save. Get started with a 2 or 3 pack of t-shirts today and feel the difference for yourself. True Classic offers 100% perfect fit guarantee and easy returns. So if you're ready to upgrade your closet, shop now with my exclusive link at trueclassictees.com/SRS and save up to 25% off your first order. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. No matter how you move, make 2024 your most comfortable year yet with True Classic. All right, Edwin, we're back from the break.
Okay.
We're going to get into some SRI stuff. So,
very good.
In 1975, you joined the ongoing U.S. government-sponsored work at SRI, formerly called Stanford Research Institute. You became interested in parapsychological phenomena, and in 1985 became the program's director. Can we dive into how you got involved with SRI?
Well, it was late 75 as a consultant. That was arranged by Ingo Swann.
Okay.
Because Ingo and I had worked together at Maimonides Medical Center and published some of our results. And he couldn't tell me that it was all classified. But he said to me, you're a physicist. I'm involved in some work at SRI that involves physics, and I'd like to know whether you'd be interested if I were to bring it up. And I said, well, I need to learn more about it. well, let me go talk to the people in California about it first. So I found out later Ingo threw one of his infamous tantrums and screamed and yelled. And so to defend himself, I think Hal hired me as a consultant. My job was, because being a physics manager in experimental work, not theory, there was a magnetometer that was being used at the laboratory. And the idea was that Ingo was supposed to use his psychic ability to distort the magnetic field around the magnetometer. And I said, okay, fair enough. I'm good at debugging these things. Let's see what happened. So I went and I bought a few dollar bar magnet, little tiny bar magnet. And the magnetometer was in the lab, and I was outside in the hall, and I just walked doing this with the bar magnet, flipping it back and forth, and the strip chart recorder followed my thing. In other words, it wasn't as well isolated as it should have been. So in a sense, I did my job as to show that it's, hey, don't put much faith in this, fix it or quit. Mm-hmm. It was funded by the Navy, actually. So that was part of it, what started it. And I ended up being a consultant all the way up till 79, and finally they decided to hire me as a senior research physicist. My consulting was not part-time. I was a full-time consultant.
Okay.
Yeah. So they hired me as a senior research physicist and went on from there.
What kind of stuff were you guys getting into there?
Well, the agency, first of all, people think of our program as a CIA program. They accounted for less than 2% of our entire funding.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't fund us.
Well, let's talk about. So
in fact,
you
it was
were on.
1%.
Were you on there when the agency started funding?
I was there while it was still funding it.
But not at the beginning.
No.
Can you talk about? Do you have knowledge about what caught the CIA's interest?
Yes.
In this program?
In fact, it's in one of my published books about it because the CIA released it. One of the things that's really fun in my briefing is to make fun of the CIA, which I do extensively, because the Congress ordered the CIA to release everything. Now, so there are like 5 or 6 copies of the same paper with different redactions on each of these papers. So I've got a letter signed by William Casey, the director of the CIA, where his name is not redacted. All the other versions of it, his name is redacted. And it says, released by the CIA with this number, so it's not, I'm not breaking any laws, right? Mm-hmm. They did it. And the only thing they redacted in the whole damn thing was the author of the memo to Casey starting the program. And they didn't redact his name. They only redacted his signature, and you can see that because a little bit of the part of his signature sneaks out underneath the redaction. Wow. Come on, guys. I mean, they didn't give a damn, they were just doing it all together.
But what caught their attention to give any funding whatsoever?
Very good question, and I think I know the answer to that. It was Ingo Swann, actually. Ingo was doing some work. First of all, back up. There's an organization in London called the Society for Psychical Research. And it was founded in 1882 by some of the top scientists of that era. And that spawned a number of sister organizations, one of which was called the American Society for Psychical Research, based on 73rd Street in New York, Manhattan. In fact, I was invited to give a talk there, so I went to my management at SRI. They did some background and said, oh, my God, that's older than the American Physical Society, so go, which I did. But the ASPR worked with Ingo Swann. And it turns out that Ingo could describe some randomly chosen target above the tiles in the roof over his head. And a guy named, I think it was Ken Kress in those days, an agency fellow, S&T shop guy.
Science and technology.
Yeah, right. Said, well, if this is real, we probably don't think it is, but it has intelligence implications if it is real. And long story short, it was real.
Who was the first I guess not who, what was the first agency? I mean, this went to lots of organizations caught interest in this. I mean, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, I know exactly how it moved.
Intelligence arms of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, U.S. Secret Service, Department of State, the Department of Justice, and the FBI. I mean, all of these organizations caught wind of this and expressed interest.
Well, let's put it this way.
Eventually.
Eventually. Basically, the CIA was in deep trouble because of the Nixon administration. And they wanted to get out of the business themselves. They already had a big problem on their hands. And FTD, Foreign Technology Division of the Air Force, based out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, took it up after that. Our contract monitor was a guy named Dale Graff, and he's still around, delightful man, personal friend. And he was a contract monitor. And so we had funding from FTD, from the Air Force, for a while. And then a long, very complicated story. It doesn't matter how it happened. But Dale shifted over to the Defense Intelligence Agency. He left FTD as a civilian employee to the Air Force. And he's a physicist, and moved to Bowling Air Force Base, which is part of the DIAC, Defense Intelligence Agency Analysis Center is what that's called, in Washington. And then he became our contract. We got a lot of money from DIA.
What were they wanting you to do?
Unfortunately, not research. It's all intelligence collection. So they kept giving us tasking to do this. This was long before Fort Meade remote viewers were involved.
No kidding.
We did it for the most part until 1970, probably 1979.
So was the funding to actually collect, or was the funding to collect? It wasn't to research.
No, absolutely. And we bitched and moaned about it. We could do some research because we heard, well, the Russians are doing so-and-so. Well, is that real? So we would do research to see whether that had any validity to it or not.
What was it the Russians were doing that caught their attention?
Well, let's see, quite a number of things. One of the things were somebody down in Crimea had, I think there were rats running around, and somebody in Moscow was using their influence to change the behavior of the rats. And we said, okay, we're not going to do this with rats, but it involves psychokinesis. So we did some psychokinesis research.
Can you talk about psychokinesis?
Yeah, it means mind over matter. It's a long, long thing, and there are two ways of thinking about that. One is behavior of a physical system that you need statistics to understand whether something's really happening, or what's called macro PK, that you don't need statistics. Like you just levitate to the ceiling. You don't need statistics. The guy's doing it, right? So I argue with my colleague in India right now. There's something called poltergeist. Have you ever heard of that term?
No, I haven't.
What that means is noisy ghost. And so there's a lot of work on poltergeist phenomenon. Very strange things happen. And I leave the door open that maybe something interesting is actually happening there. A very respected guy taught for 50 years at the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology. And he wrote a number of books on poltergeist. And he saw this one case where the classic case is it's a very religious family and with a brand new infant and a prepubescent teenager, didn't matter what gender. So Arthur Hastings was his name. He's passed away quite some time ago. Arthur writes the story that he was witnessing firsthand. There was this teenager, that classic case, this little baby boy was lying naked on the bed, and he watched a set of rosary beads fly off the dresser, wrap the beads around the genitals of this little baby boy, and Arthur had to reach in to pull them off. What is going on with that? That's hard to fake, it seems to me. That's an example of large-scale something or another.
Was that real?
I trust Arthur, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Now, my colleague in India, who's a neuropsychologist, thinks, well, there could be what is called group hallucinations. And on this book, the last author here is a guy named Lloyd Auerbach, because the first version was written like it was designed by a committee, and it read that way. And I said, Lloyd, can you fix this for us? So he rewrote the whole book. I'll tell you a side story, and it's his story. You'd be interesting to have him come and talk to you. He's a ghost hunter and not a crazy one. And there's a aircraft carrier, the Enterprise, permanently docked in Alameda, California, as a museum. And he was on the board to get it set up safe for humans. And there are all kinds of funny stories he talks about that. That a whole bunch of engineers were sitting in the below deck aircraft hangar, and not open to the public yet. They see three guys in World War II military uniform running along a gangway high up. He said you could see them, but you couldn't hear them. And everybody in the room saw them. And they disappeared. You're not supposed to be here. And they didn't answer and just disappeared. Then poor Lloyd got the impression that all of his buddies were trying to make this place safe. They were joking with him all the time. Hey, talk to your ghost buddies. We need some more chain. We've run out of chains. And ghosts are supposed to have a lot of chains. Oh, yeah, right. They came the next day. There were mounds of chains all over the deck. Where the hell that came from? The story of his he talks I like the best. One of the board members was really a grumpy old guy and just didn't want to prove anything and screaming and yelling. And so they said to Lloyd, is there anything you could do not to hurt this guy, but to make the idea real to him? Well, it was a typical lightning storm like we had yesterday here, and a tree hit in the parking lot of this in Alameda, and the tree fell over and crushed this poor guy's car. He wasn't in it, thank goodness, at the time. So what the hell's going on with that? And Lloyd's written a whole book about it. In fact, I'm having lunch with him Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Lloyd talks about basically he's a ghost hunter, and not a crazy one, you say?
Definitely not.
This interview is not going the way I had planned, but I'm just going to go with it. But I just want to say, in your introduction, we had said that you believed, it sounds like you believe consciousness dies with the body.
I do.
And so if you believe your colleague, your former colleague and friend Lloyd, is hunting ghosts, and he's not crazy.
How do I square that round hole?
Yes.
Very good question. And Lloyd's agreed with this. We talk about this a lot, that the assumption that this is a disincarnate entity, a ghost, even though they call it, they call it ghost, noisy ghost. But it may not be that way. There may be some other mechanism of the more normal type, not fraud, some other mechanism that might be involved in that psychokinesis. All psychokinesis, if it's real, and to me it's an open question, not true on micropsychokinesis, but macropsychos is still open for me. But it does not necessarily require a disincarnate entity. That's an open question. I might be wrong. Hey, I've been wrong before.
What do you think happens when we die?
Nothing.
Do you think we're just dead, lights out?
You bet. Yep.
How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I can't say by experience yet. Talk to me 10 years from now, we'll figure it out. Done a lot of reading, and most neuroscientists believe that consciousness is a outgrowth of the brain, an emergent property of the brain. And if that is true, consciousness cannot survive burning the brain in crematorium after you're dead. Can't do it.
Have you looked into near-death experiences at all?
I haven't, but I've certainly looked into the research. There's an organization called the Templeton Foundation. They spent $5 million, on research labs all over the world to address the question of near-death experiences. And Templeton is well known for spiritual things like that. And they publish, you can go to their site and read it, that the idea was that they cannot find data to support that is a real phenomenon. The experience is real, but whether that, you see your dead grandmother and you go in the light, you see the light, all those things. Trouble is, it's an interesting report because they say those are kind of expectations now, didn't start off that way. When you have a near-death experience, and Joe had 2 or 3, I think, and he saw the rain going through his fingers, and I think he saw the light as well, if I remember right. Did he tell you the details of his near-death experience in Austria?
He was this when he was poisoned? He did.
Good. I normally don't mention that until... So those are interesting open questions, which gets to the point. People ask me, why the hell are you doing this research, any kind? And for me, the answer is, I'm just quoting Chuck Honerton, actually. He said, we may not be able to solve these questions about do you survive your possibly death and what is the meaning of life and all of those important, serious questions. It may be that we are adding tools to the toolkit that somebody 50 years from now will be able to answer those questions.
With what you've come up, the fact that you think that consciousness dies with the body and there is no afterlife, I mean, does that... Yeah.
Well, Jews don't believe in an afterlife to begin with, for starters, but that's not why I don't believe in it.
Do you fear death?
Not that I know of. In fact, it seems to me, there was, I guess I can use a Star Trek example, which I was really loved. And briefly, the Star Trek was going around some planet, and they had a visitor from the planet there who was a brilliant astrophysicist. They knew that the star for that planet was going to go supernova, and he was working on the details to stop that from happening. And he has a romance on board the spaceship, and he says to the woman, "I have to go down for my exiting ceremony." "What are you talking about?" "On our planet, when you reach 60 years old, you gather your friends and relatives around, and at the end of the party, you're dead." And he said, "We do that because we need fresh blood. We need new people, new thinking." "But you're trying to solve..." No. And so she talks him out of going down to the planet for his exiting ceremony. And all the relatives come up and are ashamed of him. And finally he says, "I've got to go." And she says, "I now understand. Well, I'll have the pleasure of being there with you." So in some sense, I feel that way. In fact, let me ask you this way. I've got a magic pill here. Mm-hmm. If you take this pill, you will live for the next 150 years with perfect health. Would you take that pill?
Probably not.
Why?
Because I do believe in an afterlife.
Okay.
And I look forward to getting there.
Okay. Fair enough. That's a good answer. That's one of the best ones I've heard. I wouldn't take it because part of life is the renewal. Can you imagine working for the same boss for 150 years? Forget it. It's bad enough our Congress on both sides of the aisle, they're all too bloody old as far as I'm concerned. We need some young folks.
I could definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so that's a serious critique. I mean, part of the problem is, here you are, World War II vet or maybe 50s, and you see a problem. And boy, you go through the process and you finally get elected to Congress. By the time you get there, the problem no longer is relevant, but you're stuck in that realm. Mm-hmm. And you see that all the time. And I don't care what party you're talking about, you see it all the time. That's a terrible way to run anything.
Agreed. Agreed.
So let's not get into politics.
Yeah, let's not do that. But you know, man, that's the other answer to that is there's a lot of beautiful things about life, family, lots of stuff. But
Sure. You get to see them growing up and all that. Yeah.
We're all just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And everybody, I don't know any other way to put it, but everybody's got their shit. Everybody's got their ball and chain they're dragging around, with them as they go through life, and it gets heavy. It gets real heavy at times. And I believe when we go, we leave that ball and chain behind. But that's interesting. You don't fear nothingness.
Nope. No, I've never been confronted on the battlefield where I'm facing death straight on.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see when my time comes. But right at the moment, no. And I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm retiring from Psi Research the end of this year. Because how would I refer to it? My not stepdaughter, it would be daughter-in-law. My daughter, Jamie, is married to a woman named Laura, as a matter of fact. And she is a grief counselor. She's Jewish, and a grief counselor at one of the big health organizations called Sutter Health. And we've become really close friends. She is helping me transition. And she bought me a book about, it's a centimeter thick, and it's entitled, You're Dead Now, Now What? And what that is it's not about survival of bodily death. What it is documents. It's a book of not to read, but to fill in, so that people left behind will know where what your passwords are, what your bank account numbers are, and all the details that people have to undo when you're gone. I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And we could have an honest discussion about death, and it was actually fun. Believe it or not.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But wow. Well, let's get back to SRI. So,
speaking of death,
we were talking about the agency. What caught the agency's attention to give the funding? Who was the first intelligence organization to fund SRI? Was it CIA?
Yeah.
And then everybody else followed. Was it shortly thereafter?
CIA quit because they were in trouble already. So it was picked up then by FTD. And then Dale Graff went to DIA, and they were funding us. And then I landed a $10 million contract with the U.S. Army Medical Research Development Command in Fort Detrick. And the commander there was a 2-star general and MD. And I thought, oh, man, he's got 2 strikes against him. He's a doctor. Oh, no. And a general. Goodness me. Turned out he was the most fascinating man I ever met. We became really close friends, and Diane and I were when his son got married, at the head table with him. He spoke n number of languages, I don't know how many, including Mandarin. Just a very clever guy. And what he wanted to spend, he took, do you know the term MIPR? Have you heard of that in government funding?
No.
The Congress cannot, in fact, fund anybody except a executive branch agency. They can't fund SRI or me or you. So they have to send the money, called MIPR the money, to some other organization. So that's how we got most of our money that way, via Congress directly. But Gary Ratman took $10 million out of his own department funding, not money coming from Congress, to figure out how does this stuff work. And he was the first one to say, we are doing research here to figure out how this worked. Now, it's not well known, and it's not secret. We had some remote viewers on board spacecraft, remote viewing our targets on the ground. And we want to know whether the Earth was a shield or not. It was not.
You put remote viewers in space.
We didn't. Gary Ratman did. Our job was just to run the experiment on the ground.
Let's talk about that.
No, let's not, because I don't know any more about it than what I just told you. It's not written up at the CIA anywhere.
Okay. All right.
Not because it's secret. It's just one of those things you try and see what happened.
How about daily life at SRI? What were you guys doing on a daily basis?
Having lots of fun. Because we had special clearances that most of the other people at SRI did not have. And we had one whole wing of the building, second floor, and cipher lock doors at each end. That meant behind those doors, we could do stuff that no one else could do at SRI. Like when we had birthday parties, we had wine and cake and all kinds of good stuff. Had parties and stuff. We worked hard and we played hard. We had Friday afternoon Psi Media Emporium on the upstairs third floor of the building, a lab. We'd show movies and have popcorn and beer. Neither of which, well, we were supposed to have beer, but we did anyway. But that play hard was very, very important because it was a team organization. And when I took over the team, it was really a whole shift. And a good one, I think. And they enjoyed me as much as I enjoyed them.
How were you guys doing your recruiting?
That was hard. Because you can't legally in California, maybe in the whole country, ask her questions on a recruit to join the research group that you are not supposed to ask. Does this bother your religious sensitivities? Mm. Really important question. I figured out a way to sort of tease that out of somebody because it's really important. We had an 06 Colonel Pete McNeilis sat on my head for 4 years. It drove me crazy. He was a devout Roman Catholic, and what we were doing absolutely violated his whole principles about everything, and it just caused us just a huge amount of grief.
How would you recruit your subjects, such as people like
that's
Joe?
A different story. The Army and Fort Meade, the big question is how can we get more psychic intelligence officers? And today we still don't have. In fact, the folks down in Brazil are asking that same question. We have psychologists looking at every sort of personality factors, doesn't matter. Health factors, yeah, it plays a role. Genetics factors, we don't know. But none of the normal tests of skill of any kind, external skill, the only thing we can do to find who's good at it is to have a room full of people try it and do it 2 levels. Pick the 10% best people in the room, have them come in one at a time for 8 sessions, and then decide whether they're any good or not. And when we did that, with as much as 600 people over time, 1% of them performed excellently under laboratory conditions. And that's frustrating. And that's why we're hoping in Brazil, if we get a neurological signal in an MRI, that's much better to find people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you went through 600 subjects.
They were in groups. For example, 2 alumni groups from Stanford, a group from Mensa. And they were pissed off that the Stanford group beat them, which I predicted would be the case. Mensa people too much in their heads. The U.S. Geological Survey group, which was right around the corner. And a couple, SRI itself. In fact, it was really interesting. SRI has its own internet system. And so I started asking, we're going to have a brown bag lunch. We're going to do some remote viewing. And one guy, I've forgotten his name now, just went ballistic. We thought we got rid of those morons, this fraudulent nonsense bullshit. Why are we doing this, blah, blah, blah. Well, we had 50 people from SRI sitting in the room. And this guy was in the front row like this. Oh, boy. He did the best in the room. This can't be real. But okay, come on, we're going to do our 8 sessions on you. He scored beautifully, and we're still good friends. He says, I think I can fake it. No, I'm sorry, you're screwed with it. You have this ability, my friend. Own it.
Out of 600 people, we got 6 subjects. That's 1%.
1%, yeah.
And so, when you're trying to figure out if this is genetically passed on, what kind of experiments are you conducting?
None.
To try to figure this out?
None. That's very difficult. I'm not. Our group don't have the skill set to do that. The folks down in Brazil do. You need to do familiar work. You have to familiar meaning within families. And we have a couple of data points that suggest, like Angela Ford is an identical twin, and I had the pleasure of working with her identical twin. And at least with one trial, she seemed equally as good as Angela. And Joe claims that his fraternal twin was equally as good as he, but I never met her. She had passed before that. So 2 data points don't make a model. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's where we are.
What type of experiments were you conducting on
just regular remote viewing, like we just did?
And when did it?
I mean, that's a bread and butter thing that I just did with you. Mm-hmm. Have laptop will travel, like the movie Have Gun Will Travel.
I mean, the experiments, did they not develop into anything else, or was it the same experiment over and over and over and over again for 10 plus years?
We've gotten very sophisticated about it. I mean, I brought in a whole new mathematical approach to it, which people have wondered, how do you know in advance whether a particular remote viewing is good, bad, or indifferent, particularly if you're doing intelligence collection? You don't want to invest a lot of money if it's bullshit. So how do you prevent that from happening? And until our group didn't know, but now we do know how to do that. Confidence calling, so to speak.
Was SRA experimentation strictly on, well, I know it wasn't strictly on remote viewing, but what else were you guys conducting studies on?
We did a bacteriological study, a PK on Salmonella bacteria. And the dependent variable is the mutation rate of the bacteria. And there's a whole group at SRI that studies that sort of thing. And it was kind of funny because it was triple blind. The head of that department knew what we were doing, but the person making the samples of Salmonella bacteria, we had 9 test tubes, and she'd pour them into 9 test tubes this from the same batch, and label them 1 through 9, lock them in an empty fish tank. And one of our colleagues, Beverly Humphrey, would go and collect it. They'd put a tarp over it, and she'd wheel it across the campus to our laboratory, right by the active ingredient of food poisoning, right next to the cafeteria. We've got to be careful about that. But the idea was two ways. Participants were asked to take the 3 test tubes on the left and decrease the mutation rate by psychic means, who knows what, by psychokinesis. The 3 test tubes on the right, increase it, leave the 3 alone. That was one condition. Another one was randomly, depending on which participant, you could pick any 3 test tubes you want to increase the mutation rate, pick any other 3, any ones you want for the decrease, and then the ones left over you left alone. That worked extremely well. And we have a different reason why that might work. It had nothing to do with psychokinesis.
What is the reason?
Well, there's a variation. There is a statistical variation in mutation rates anyway. So if you could use your psychic ability to find the ones that are faster mutating anyhow and say, I'm going to increase it there, you're not doing anything. You're just picking out ones that are more likely to be increasing and ones that are more likely not to be decreasing, using remote viewing, so to speak. In fact, we developed a whole procedure and published it called decision augmentation theory. In other words, ESP is not good enough to make major decisions. You should never do that because it's unreliable. but it can augment your decision a little bit in the right direction. And that works.
In 1985, I believe you were named director of Stargate.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how that happened?
Sure.
What those conversations were like?
Well, I was standing on very tall shoulders. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ. Russell, they started Stargate, not named by that then. Russell left for greener pastures in 1982, and Hal left in 1985. So I inherited the directorship. I'm glad. I loved it.
I mean, that's a big deal. I'll bet you were glad. Yeah. What did you want to change about the program, if anything?
Well, is that an interesting question? Better communication. Hal was a very talented guy, still is, and I like the guy a lot, but he just hardly communicated with anybody and anything. We used to joke behind his back, his right hand doesn't know what his left hand is doing. He used to work at NSA, and I think that as a Navy guy, and that might have influenced it, but it was hard to get Hal to communicate with you. And with me, I'm the other way around. I communicate too much.
When NSA, CIA, FBI, Secret Service, when any of these government organizations would approach, who would they approach when they wanted somebody to remote view a target? Would they approach SRI? Would they approach Joe specifically? Were you a part of that?
Well, before the Fort Meade group were involved, which means up to from 72 to all the way up to 79 about. SRI did it all the operational work. And so Hal would get a notice from, Department of State. One of the things we worked with was the Korean tunnels under the DMZ zone. Where the hell that came from, I don't know. But some of those things, they contacted either the people, they were the funders, so they would call SRI, and we were RFP, request for proposal, and we'd give it to them.
Were you present during these remote viewings?
Which ones?
Any of them?
Oh,
all of them?
Well, from
as director?
From 85 onward, yeah.
What are some of the most fascinating ones that just stick out in your mind? I'll bring one up.
Okay.
That I want to ask you about. When I had Joe in here, he had talked about he remote viewed Mars, I believe maybe it was 1 million BC, and saw and there was a pyramid. Are you familiar with this?
Yep.
I'll let you pick it up from there.
I don't believe a word of it.
You don't believe a word of it?
No, because you can't get... Psychic functioning requires data feedback that it was correct or not. You cannot prove that statement.
Okay.
That's why I don't buy it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
What are some...
Because that's a fantasy. In fact, do you know that there was a group called Heaven's Gate that had mass suicide in California? Because one of the remote viewers from Fort Meade said, the Kohoutek comet is coming by, and it's followed by a spacecraft full of lizard people. He remote viewed that. And they're going to come and invade the Earth and eat all your youngsters, or whatever the hell it was. And 40 people, I don't know what the number is, I made it up, but a large number of people literally killed themselves out of fear. And I got called into what the hell's going on. I was asked by the cops about that. That's the danger of making remote viewing without feedback. He had no idea what the hell he was talking about. That's the danger.
Makes a lot of sense. What are some remote viewings that you witnessed that did have feedback?
Sure.
That were accurate?
Yeah. One of the things that the Department of Energy was interested in could we use remote viewing to sense directed beam energy systems? And we had two that they paid for $50,000 for remote viewings for each, for one viewing on that problem. And one of them was called Project Rose, very classified at that time. It was a microwave, high-powered microwave generator in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Sandia National Labs. And we didn't know that, of course, at the time. We were held blind. And said, here's the geographical coordinates where this person is going to be standing a week from today. Tell us what you see. And Joe absolutely bloody nailed it. He said, it's a, whatever it is, I mean, I could show you the PowerPoint on it, but he drew a, in fact, it'll bring an interesting thing up here in a minute, a contained environment, and he drew something that looks like a microwave generator horn, and some other details detailed about it. And he said, this thing is a destructive testing of something. He didn't know what it was. And it turned out that's exactly what this thing was doing. They were shining this high-energy microwave thing on electronics to see what the effects were on the electronics. It was called Project Rose. And however, about a month later, we gave Joe feedback by driving to that location. And on the way there, Sandia had a solar collection farm, a huge, maybe 100-meter field of mirrors focusing the sun's energy on the top of a tower. And the tower was sparkling like crazy with all that. And we're stopped there. And I said to Beverly Humphrey with it, let's put a sack over Joe's head. He shouldn't be seeing this because it's in his future. And his whole responses were full of mirrors. And the target had nothing to do with mirrors, which raises a really interesting question. But he nailed it. We showed him the generator, and it worked really fine. We did another one on a high...
What was the interesting question?
Pardon me?
You'd said that rose an interesting question.
Oh, yeah. Okay. In fact, I'm designing a study now to study this very effect. Look, let's suppose you're doing a remote viewing. Somebody randomly chose something, and it was a gas station. And on the way to give you feedback, there's a building on fire. Oh, my God, look at this. And that is far more interesting for you to remote view than the actual target system.
Okay.
And yeah. So the question then is, how do you prevent that? And I don't think you can, actually. So actually, Joe came up with this idea. We did an experiment to test whether this business of changing of entropy, does that help people remote view? And we did that by creating sort of an entropy bomb, as it were, that the experimenter would be out at the site, and half the time she would pour liquid nitrogen into a bucket full of balls, and that would evaporate in 8 seconds, and that would be a huge change of entropy. And with that catch the remote view, it's like a flashlight in a dark room. With some caveats, it worked beautifully. Now, there's some funny odd things. You know, outside a Catholic church, the priest would come out, what are you guys doing? Oh, it's an experiment. Don't worry, this big cloud of stuff's coming out of this box. A lot of very funny stories about that. But but Joe made the point. It was really, really interesting. He said, you know, to prevent these things I was just telling you, the tasking was this. Okay, Shawn, please access and describe the first thing you see when we take off the blindfold. In other words, instead of driving to the gas station and here's a building on fire, we'd have the blindfold. You wouldn't even see the building on fire, and it would take it off looking at and that worked beautifully. In fact, much more precisely than I imagined, because in the middle of this study, Angela Ford's twin sister passed away. And she couldn't come out to California. So I flew to finish up her trials at her house. Now, that means I can't take her to the site. But everything else worked just the way it's supposed to work out in California, except when I found out what the site is to be, I said to Angela, wouldn't tell her, said, please put on the blindfold. And we'd sit patiently on her couch as if I was driving to the site. And I'd say, okay, we're pulling into the parking lot now, Angela. And I had professional photographs of the site where it was predefined, where you stand and where you're supposed to look at first. That was all predefined. So I would take Angela to a blank wall, hold that picture for that site right in front of her, take off the blindfold. It was statistically equivalent to doing it in real time at the site as opposed to the photograph. That worked beautifully, a piece of Joe's research.
Wow. Wow. What are a couple of other ones that just blew you away?
It had to do with the directed energy system again, a high energy electron accelerator at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. And I cheated in some sense, at least in my briefings, and I'll fess up to it every time. Joe was to do remote viewing in 8-hour segments, saying, hey, track this guy that's going to be on site somewhere in the Bay Area. And after the whole thing was over, we had one of the women on our project was a right sitter for United Airlines, so she had a private pilot as well. And we flew over Lawrence Livermore Lab at a high enough altitude we wouldn't get into trouble. And I took pictures that flattered the data. Didn't need to, because the Air Force was funding this, and they did the analysis, not me. But in my briefing, it looks overwhelmingly delightful. And I say, don't believe this as good as it looks, because it isn't, because I took pictures to make it look good. I fess up to that every time. But it's very, very stunning. I mean, Joe, for example, described the headquarters, the office building at Lawrence Livermore Lab, the shape of the building and the right number of floors, and he got that right, because that's where the guy was planning for the execution later on.
Wow.
Pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Anything else that really sticks out? Anything in space? That caught your attention?
Ingo Swann did a project going, quote, out of body to Jupiter. And he, quote, did a, quote, flyby by Jupiter. I said, Ingo, how the hell do you know where Jupiter is? You can't find Jupiter on a map. How did you know how to do that? So I have no idea. I just said, here, Jupiter, here I come. And he was the first to describe in advance of NASA that Jupiter had rings like Saturn. Pretty impressive.
I mean, what is going through your head? Well, hold on. How long?
I want to know what's going through your head right now.
My mind is blown.
Oh, dear.
So what was the time between when he had remote viewed Jupiter and found out that there were and saw rings to actual imagery of it?
I don't know. I'd have to check, but it was not immediate. It was months.
It's only months.
Yeah.
And so what's going through your head after they came with that imagery?
Oh, it's impressive. Are you kidding? Well, we did another one, the remote viewer. It turns out that Jupiter has a whole bunch of moons. And one of them is called Io, and it goes around Jupiter very rapidly. It's very close to the surface. So it suffers an eclipse every orbit. So I went to my boss at SRI because Bulletin Watch Company wanted to give an award for somebody with the most interesting experiment on time. So I said, hey, I want to go to get that. And so my boss said, are you interested in winning the Bulletin Watch Company's, or do you want to actually do the experiment? I said, I really want to do the experiment. So he said, I'll fund it for you. So with this participant, we'd be up at 3 a.m. So I had the remote viewing was tell us in time when you remote view the moon of Jupiter and it's half lit. That was the definition of the eclipse time. Half lit by the shadow of Jupiter. I forgot how many trials we did. It was quite a number of them. And he was right within plus or minus 10 seconds. Now, the question is, in what time frame did he get that? Did he get it before because we had to hire a telescope at Chabot College to make the measurements for us, because how did we know when it was? Which they did for us. We paid them for it. So the question is, did this participant named Gary get it in Jupiter's time, which was 40 minutes ahead of the telescope, because it was 40 light minutes away, or did he get it in... So the question is, what do you think? In other words, is remote viewing faster than the speed of light?
Jupiter time.
That's when it appeared. But the question is, did he actually get the data at that time? I think what happened is he got the data. He had his experience at that time, but he was actually getting the data from precognition of the next day's photograph we showed him the answer. And that's really hard to separate out.
Wow. Wow.
Some of these things are pretty hard to do, actually.
Yeah, I could imagine. Actually, I can't imagine. You know, wow.
Oh, come on, you're here. You see why I have so much fun with it. And it's challenging, and it angers me that we can't figure out how to do this better than we do.
Yeah, you know, and I'm learning a lot. So what's the Fort Meade piece? Are they an in-between?
Well,
so what I'm starting to understand is SRI's Stanford Research Institute, this wasn't their sole focus. You were the director of a program within Stanford Research Institute.
Oh, yeah,
correct?
SRI does a whole lot of stuff, sure.
So that, I did not realize that. And so was Fort Meade the bridge between agencies and SRI?
No. Russ Targ and I completely agreed on this, that started with Ingo Swann. Ingo was, he told me once that I should not be his friend because he's a bitch on wheels, and that was an understatement. And he said, I hate flying out here to California to do your stupid experiments. Why, there's an office in New York City for SRI. Let me do the experiments there. And Hal said, sure. And Ed and Russ Targ said, no, he's not a scientist. You need supervision on this. Well, Hal said no. And that started something we're paying deeply for even now, an Ingo Swann cult. That Ingo went there and trained. He was a brilliant guy, but he's not a scientist. And that started the Fort Meade people went up and were trained by all this guy, and almost none of them produced actionable intelligence.
So these are two totally separate entities.
Yeah.
Almost competitors.
No, my job, was to do research to make their job better.
Okay.
And they never opened any of my classified emails.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, it's definitely a shame. They could have had a much better product.
When did the Hemi Sync come into play?
It never did.
It never did?
Mm-mm.
Do you believe in the Hemi Sync?
Not at all. The reason is it's bad neuroscience. It's just not right what they're doing.
How so?
And Joe, and I've had conversations with Joe about it because it was...
Let me just, can you describe what Hemi Sync is for the audience?
Yes. Hemi Sync is supposedly this, that based on radio technology, that if you get slightly different frequencies in your ears, that you get the sum and difference of those frequencies, like that's called heterodyning. And that supposedly is what's hemisphere synchronization. That's where Hemi Sync comes from. Except that was put up by Bob Monroe himself. And it has never yet to this day been put to a test. I've asked Joe that. Have you had any neuroscientists check that out? And the answer is no. And Bob Monroe was not a neuroscientist, but it's part of the milieu of this company. And people go and they have a wonderful experience. I don't mind people having experience about it. But in terms of whether it improves or doesn't or related to remote viewing, who knows?
So you don't consider anything to enhance this, or you're looking strictly at factual information?
Pardon?
You're looking at strictly factual information that's
Absolutely.
been tested through science.
It's weird enough as it is if I start putting goofy stuff in there.
Is there anything else that that you're not buying off on that has to do with the remote viewing space? Such as the Hemi Sync.
Remote viewing flying saucers on Mars. You know, in fact, Joe makes this big point in his book, his Remote Viewing Secrets, and all the stuff that he writes. And we've given joint talks together at Monroe, actually. And I love the guy dearly, and we're brothers. And the question then becomes, if it's a study, and I didn't invent what I'm about to tell you, if it is a study, there has to be eventual answer to that study. Maybe it's not what you expect, it's some other answer, who knows, but there's some result of that study. If you don't have a result of a study, it's fun to do, it's fantasy. You have no idea what you're doing. And so if you have something, and a guy by the name of Stevenson, Ian Stevenson is his name, he did the definitive work at the University of Virginia on survival after bodily death work. Very clever guy. And even he said that he cannot separate experimentally whether someone's having an experience of a former life or they're using extrasensory perception to get the same data. And that's a real tough question. I didn't invent that, he did. But we've taken that and put mathematics behind it to where he can actually test whether it's decision-making or something else is going on. If it's decision-making, psychically decision-making, or is it a causal effect? And we can test that.
You just mentioned previous life. What are your thoughts on that?
Don't believe it. Because the evidence are self-reported, all of it. And if you want to know something that is really bad, we humans are horrible at describing our personal experiences accurately. We are. In fact, there are two jobs that people do. One is a magician, and the other is a therapist. I come to you as a therapist. Shawn, I just met this fantastically beautiful woman today. She is funny and cute and brilliant and all of that. And you say to me, Ed, when are you going to understand you hate your mother? That's the point. That we, in fact, there's books written on it. In fact, there's even a short video online that you could look at called The Invisible Gorilla. I recommend the book written by these two people, and they outline all the ways in which we are masterful at fooling ourselves. So I'm skeptical about it now because I get fooled equally well. In fact, Doug Henning was a really magnificent magician, and Chuck Hunt and I went to a Broadway show of him doing this stuff, and it's really amazing. So I told Chuck, I'm coming back here tomorrow, and I'm going to figure out one bloody trick, how he does it. So I sat there at the center, seventh row center, and I could not figure out any of it. Or better yet, there's a guy, Dale, no. I'm blocking on his name. He'll come to me in a minute. And he's a brilliant researcher, and Daryl Bem is his name. And he was at our house for dinner in Palo Alto. And after dinner, a lot of fun. Diane was sitting at the head table. I was sitting to her left, and he was sitting to her right, and our daughter was next to him. He said, okay, I'm going to do a trick. This is a trick. Now, I'm going to push this quarter that I have through this solid oak table into a cup. So it goes clink. Yeah, that's a trick. Now I'm going to break the rules and show you how it's done. So he said it's sleight of hand. The coin is already in the cup before it goes under the table, and you think it's still in my hand, all right? So when he did it again in slow motion, knowing armed A, that it's a trick, B, when and where and how it's happening, in slow motion you could see it happening. At full speed, you couldn't see it. I don't trust my observation, firsthand observation of anything. Really, we're terrible at that. And so a lot of this BS online comes from that sort of stuff, unfortunately. I mean, I was blown away. Damn it, I know you're cheating it, but I can't see it that it's happening. In fact, I went to I was giving a talk at the SPR in the Society for Psychical Research in London, and they were bragging. I was the last on the docket, teacher day, they call it, and everybody was bragging their field research. They see this, that, and the other thing. So I put in this 20-second video called The Invisible Gorilla. And I'm going to blow it for you there. What it shows, and you can go online and see it, but now I'm ruining it for you. There is two teams, three people with black jerseys on and three people with white jerseys on, and each team has their own basketball. And the idea is that the people with white jerseys can only throw their basketball to other white jersey people. And the black jersey people, the same thing. They don't match their balls, all right? And your job is to count up the number of times a white jersey person tosses a ball to another white jersey person. Now, I set it up at the SPR. I said, we've been doing this research for some time and don't understand, we Americans are so much better at it than you Brits. So they're, oh yeah, I'm going to count to 5. And right in the middle of this 20-second video, a guy dressed in a gorilla suit stands right in front of the camera and goes, Ee! Nobody sees him. They do not see this gorilla. It's called the invisible gorilla. And I think there are 2 people out of 70 in the room that saw the gorilla. And the point being is, and they say, you bias this. I said, yes, indeed. And you guys bias yourself when you're out in the field. We're all susceptible to biases. And the book called Invisible Gorilla is very interesting because there are all kinds of other examples of the same problem.
How do you explain that?
Oh, well, terms. You focus on what you are biased for, and you tend to ignore the details.
So now, you're so focused on
you bet. That's why
who's passing the ball to who
that
you miss a gorilla front of the screen banging his chest.
In fact, what they do, it's really interesting. They've done eye tracking. You can put eye tracking on your eyes. The people are watching the gorilla, but they don't recognize that it doesn't appear in their consciousness, which is really interesting.
Say that again?
Okay, they can see that they're counting the balls going back and forth, but their eyes are noticing the gorilla because they can follow the fact that the gorilla is moving, and they eye track that that's happening. At the same time, they're trying to look at the ball at the same time. So they are seeing it. They're not just registering it in their consciousness.
Wow. What are some other examples of that?
Well, one I like a lot. It's online as well. You can see this. I come to you a total stranger here in downtown Nashville. And say, I'm trying to get to the Grand Ole Opry Theater. And I got a map. Back in the days when people had maps. And so I'm here, and you're saying, and you start pointing all this stuff out to me on my map. In the middle of our conversation, 2 colleagues of mine carrying an opaque door walk right between us, rudely so. And I change places with somebody carrying the door who has a map. 80% of the time, you don't realize you're talking to a totally different person. Even when the gender changes or the race changes. It's just amazing. It's just so we are not tuned at looking at the total unexpected stuff. It's fun to watch that happen. It really is.
Very interesting. Edwin, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to get into some of the stuff we were talking about with the Oversight Committee.
Okay, good. I'd love to.
How many guys out there are worried about brain health? You know, all we hear about is fitness. Everybody's getting ready for bikini season because spring's right around the corner. I'm personally more concerned about my brain. You look around, you see all these brain diseases that are getting out of control. I'm going to take everything I can to improve the health of my brain. And I'm going to tell you about my 5 favorite supplements from Laird Superfoods that help with brain health. All right, the first thing I do every morning is I have Laird Superfood Creamer. It's got adaptogens and functional mushrooms, which are great for brain health. I put this in my tea. Tastes amazing. Who likes vegetables? Cool, me neither. That's why I take Laird's Daily Greens. Just pour it in a cup, shoot it real quick. You got your daily vegetable intake. Plus, guess what? Yep, that's right. Functional mushroom extract. There's 6 different kinds in here. Once again, great for brain health. After greens, we got Daily Reds. This one doesn't actually have any functional mushrooms in it, but I can't stand beets. I think they taste like shit. And so I take 1 scoop of this, put it in my water, and I don't have to eat beets anymore. All right, we're winding down the day now. This is the next supplement I take every single night. Laird Sleep and Recovery. Helps me sleep, helps me recover from my daily workout. And guess what? Yep, you're right. It has mushroom extract. Guess what? It's good for your brain. And I saved the best for last. Most of you know this. My favorite supplement at Laird's is Performance Mushrooms. Has a ton of mushroom extract. Super, super good for your brain. Take it every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. These are my 5 favorite supplements from Laird Superfoods. You can go over to lairdsuperfoods.com. Use the promo code SRS. Save 20%. Ladies and gents, I would not have partnered with this company if I didn't believe in them. They take the cleanest ingredients. They try to source everything in America unless they find a better ingredient that's more quality somewhere else. I think we can all appreciate that. Once again, lairdsuperfoods.com. Use the promo code SRS. That'll save you 20%. Join me and my special guest for the next behind-the-scenes experience exclusively available on Vigilance Elite Patreon. The behind-the-scenes footage is raw and uncut. This is as close to the set as you can possibly get. You can expect anything from off-topic conversations, studio tours, the final moments before the interview starts, and everything in between. The behind-the-scenes content is constantly evolving and will continue to bring you more as we grow. You can gain access for just $15 a month exclusively at Vigilance Elite Patreon. All right, Edwin, we're back from the break and we're getting ready to dive into some of the stuff we were speaking about at breakfast when it came to the Oversight Committee.
Okay.
So what can you tell us about what you were experiencing with the Oversight Committee?
Well, when General Ratman with the Army Medical Research and Development Command funded us, he said he wants to have an oversight, people who can overview us. We actually had 3 committees. One was a scientific oversight committee. Another one was a policy oversight committee out of the Pentagon to make sure we were doing what we were being told to do. And then we had medical oversight. We had to prove, that it turns out that the Army has more strict rules on dealing with human subjects than does the National Institutes of Health. So we had to make sure that was the case. For example, we were forbidden to use women in psychokinesis experiments based on them. Because we don't know about this. Maybe there's a field effect, and if they're pregnant and we kill the fetus, all that stuff. So we had all those masters. The Scientific Oversight Committee consisted of 12 individuals who were the who's who of science during that era. 2 Nobel laureates, one in physics and one from the medical world. He was the Doctors Without Borders kind of guy. Their job had threefold. One is to review our protocols for each study before we actually collected any data. to prove them. Well, it turns out we were pretty good at that, so that was a fairly fast turnaround time. The second job that they had, which they never actually used, was to have drop-in privileges unannounced to watch what was going on. They never did that.
They never did that?
No. We paid them $750 a day for their work when they came to SRI. Third one is that we had to write up, I guess my first time running the show, I had something like 13 different tasks that I had to do this year, and each one had a final report and so on. We submitted the final reports before sending them to the client, the government agency, to the oversight committee. They had the rights to respond in writing. And in Volume 2 of the Stargate Archives book, their stuff is all there. I published it, critiquing us. And then they would come to SRI and meet in person with us. And that was, for me, a thrilling experience. We won about close to 80% of the arguments that we got into with these guys. But the best part of it was the 20% we lost, because we learned how to do the product much, much better. If you say, were they all convinced about the reality of ESP? Absolutely none of them were. But they were all convinced we were doing the best science one can do in the topic. It was amazing. And we had one guy on the oversight committee who was chief of statistics, head of the statistics department at UC Riverside. Excuse me. And he was all wrapped around the axle over our fuzzy set arithmetic. Mm-hmm. But I showed him one of the examples that had no data other than just the example. In fact, I'm going to show it to you later, of remote viewing of directed energy system. He saw that and says, now I get it. Well, I really went after him on that. I said, why are you accepting something that is unacceptable? If there's only one trial and you're accepting it and you're rejecting years worth of work on this because you don't like the arithmetic, he sort of trottled off with his tail between his legs.
Was that the same directed energy thing that Joe had remote viewed with the mirrors?
Yeah, Joe did all. We had actually 3, but we only published 2 of them. There was an underground nuke, which we nailed, but we didn't, never went anywhere.
Can you tell me about that?
No, we just didn't do it. Joe, I don't know if he actually ended up doing remote viewing it or not. I don't recall. The captain in the Air Force who was protecting, it was done by AFTAC. Air Force, what's it? AFTAC. Threat Assessment Center. That's AFTAC.
Did the Oversight Committee present any challenges for you guys?
Yeah. It was a good challenge. They said, you know what you should do? Design your experiments that everybody's cheating and make sure that they can't, even if they were cheating, it wouldn't affect the result. That was a challenge.
How would somebody cheat on a remote viewing project?
Well, that was before we did everything precognition. It's really hard to cheat when the target hasn't even been chosen yet, so how can you cheat? Mm-hmm. But there sensory leakage, for example. Somebody who knows the target comes through the room and signals to the remote viewer what the answer is.
Why would they do that?
Oh, God knows why people cheat, period.
I mean, have you experienced that happening?
No, we never saw that.
Are there any other methods?
Oh, sure. On the Ganzfeld, where, everything has to go through electronics, so the person in the Ganzfeld is listening to stuff. Was there sensory leakage inadvertently because the crosstalk between the experimenter and the sender? So that it's not really cheating, but it's a way that results get cloudy and you can't believe them.
Would you find that the remote viewers are looking for some type of edge?
Quite the opposite. They have these experiences and they're meaningful to these people. they don't want to be accused of cheating themselves. This is real to them. They're not cheating.
How would the remote viewer experience a failure? Something, I mean, I think you had mentioned that,
Sure.
that Joe was correct 40% of the time?
Oh, he was 44%, yeah.
44%. So how do they, because I could imagine there's got to be some type of a psychological component to this as well. I mean, athletes deal with this. A lot of people don't, you know, not everybody knows how to deal with failure. Failure can get in your head. You see it in with athletes. They get into a slump. It takes,
Sure.
you know, something miraculous for them to get it back. You know, maybe somebody's making bad grades. They get into a slump. Somebody in I mean, you know, just from my own experience being an operator in the SEAL teams, I mean, people, if you have a bad house run and
Yeah.
you can get into slump with anything, right? And so I would imagine with a 44% success rate, which you're telling me is phenomenal.
It is.
How do they take failure?
Well, it turns out that's wholly individually dependent. Joe's just fine of it. Hey, doesn't work all that time. Who cares? Angela Ford, same thing. When we're doing associational remote viewing to make money on the stock market or something like that, she only gets hits 20% of the time. And that's fine with her because it makes a lot of money. So, but the other side of that, we've had people we've had to dismiss. And Ingo Swann was one of them. Ingo Swann would scream at Hal, "You're 5 minutes late. You're ruining my rise time," he would scream at Hal. And then he starts blaming.
What does that mean? You're ruining my rise time.
That's Ingo saying he's preparing for his study. He's getting risen for it to do the study. I'm just quoting Ingo. I have no idea what it actually means. Ingo required us to change all the fluorescent light bulbs in the entire lab to solar spectrum because the regular ones are destroying his remote viewer. He was really to blame everything else on his failure except himself. And that came later in his career. That's why he himself quit. We had some other people. In fact, I've been trying for years to get Joe McMoneagle and Nevin Lance, a psychologist, to write the risks of remote viewing, which there are serious risks. One is, depending upon the personalities, you begin looking at your own persona in terms of your ability to do remote viewing, and that is a huge psychological mistake. We've had to let people go. People at Fort Meade have had to let people go who go, to use a technical term, crazy for doing this stuff. It's rare, but it happens. So most people handle it just fine. I mean, you know, hey, fine, no problem. I'll come back tomorrow.
So you're saying that some people that have this ability and realize that they do have the capability wind up driving themselves crazy. How so? And why?
I don't know why. I'm not a psychologist.
Does it bother them that they have the capability?
No, it bothers them that they failed.
It bothers them that they failed.
Yeah, those few people. I asked Nevin Lance, the psychologist, I said, Nevin, how do you integrate what your remote viewing ability is with the rest of your life? He said, I don't know. I wish I could integrate the rest of my life as well.
What are some of the other risks?
I don't know. I think that's the main one.
That's the main risk.
Yeah.
Is just dealing with failure.
Yeah, if you start believing your stuff too much, it seems to me. That I'm just overlaying my own thinking out loud rather than any serious stuff about it.
So you're saying basically remote viewers will get emotionally attached to their
Big
capability.
Time, you bet. And it's really disastrous for them as well as to the unit.
Okay. Well, in 1992, it sounds like you started some type of a relationship with the Russian KGB.
I did. I'm an honorary member, not of the KGB. Turns out, I first went, I think it was even before, 92 was the first year. A expat Russian named her Christian name was Laura V. Faith. Her Russian name was Larissa Valenskaya. Very, very talented woman. She worked with Kogan in his classified research laboratory on Psi. Why the hell the Russians let her out, I have no idea. But she immigrated first to Israel because she's Jewish. And then she came to the States. And over a long series of time, she ended up getting a citizenship, becoming a Christian, and then teaching Russian at the Defense Language School in Monterey. And we hired her out of that. She got her clearance. And so I went to Moscow with her probably 4 times, one of which was all the way out to Novosibirsk. And she was very protective of me. So on one time we were, I guess one of the last time we were together on that trip, I was giving a talk at Moscow State University. She was translating for the students. And, I'm dressed like, I'm more dressed now than when I normally dress. I had a T-shirt on. And the students are looking like students. And 2 guys in suits walk into the back of the room. And I thought, 2 guys in suits. This isn't a good deal. Turns out they were from the Ministry of Defense. And they wanted us to come with, Larissa and I to come with them. And we went to, do you know what a skiff is? Have you heard that term, SCIF?
Spent a lot of time in a skiff.
Me too. So we went to a Russian version of a skiff. And in there was Alexei Yurovich Savin, this guy who I gave you pictures of, who ran the Russian remote viewing spying program. No slouch, this guy. He has two Ph.D s, one in philosophy and one in mathematics. And he had a group of remote viewers, 120 remote viewers in his program. We probably never had more than 25 at any given time. And men and women, and their remote viewing group was called 10,003. And Joe and I both have medals about this big that we're honorary members of the Russian remote viewing group.
Wow.
Yeah, I meant to bring my medal with me, but I have a picture of it. You can see it. And he was I've never met him in uniform, but he was reporting to the head of the general staff, which would mean in our world that would be equivalent to reporting to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That's how high up this was. Well monitored by the Russian hierarchy military. GRU loved it. When I was there once with Joe, we had a group meeting with a whole bunch of remote viewers. They're remote viewers, and I got to work with one of them, Elena Klimova, who was equally as good a remote viewer as Joe. He trained them in hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, that sort of thing. And I said, Alexei Yurovich, what about remote and remote viewing you don't understand? He says, well, when the bullets are whizzing over their heads, they're highly motivated. Because he took them into the Chechnya War. He retired, Savin did, and we became really good friends. And I've given talks to his students and what have you. But we were sitting around a table after a 2-day conference, the first day of which we were all slugging down. I mean, that would be a Russian shot of vodka. Not this, that. Mm-hmm. You had to swig it in one gulp. I had 11 straight of those. I should have died. I mean, I was really miserable.
I'll bet you were.
Because I don't drink that much at all. The next day I was filling my glass with water. No one noticed. Well, maybe no one said about it. But in the middle of that, the way you refer to senior Russians is not just Alexei or General Savin. You use the middle name, which is really important. Yurovich means son of Yuri. It's a really important part of the Russian culture.
Okay.
So in the middle of all this, he had his staff. He was still working for them. He was still in the military. And his staff was there at the table. And Yeah, Joe was with us. And so I've got pictures of him and Sabin. In fact, I gave it to your colleague for you, showing they were completely blitzed on vodka. But I said, Alexei Yordovich, and he interrupted me and spoke to me the only time in the 20 years I've known this man in English. He said, Ed, we're our friends. Call me Alexei. And the staff went, Then he switched back into Russian, and it was being translated by Victor Rubel. And said, I know you've been trying to get my organization chart. Here it is. And I know you're going to report a contact report. You have to write it up. Yes, sir, that's true. What you have to do is let the people at DIA know I want a joint program with you guys. And I said, on what? He said, well, you have the same problem we do, and that's terrorism, because people were blowing up subway stations in Moscow. And I said, I would be honored to join you on that. So I wrote up a 30-page, relatively classified document and handed it to the 3-star in charge of DIA in the Pentagon. And he was all excited. Oh, this is really great because it's cheap. A bottle of scotch, you get everything you need. And there's, not putting anybody in harm's way. It's ideal. And they want to do it and we want to do it. And the 3-star said, well, okay, I'm going to Moscow in a few weeks. I'll look him up and we'll get moving on it. So I walked out of his office in the Pentagon, and you could practically hear him throwing the paper in the burn bag. Never happened.
So it never went anywhere. It's interesting because I was wondering, what does the oversight committee think? I mean, you're dealing with classified information, a lot of classified information at the time. I can't imagine a relationship with the Russian KGB going over well. And I mean,
well, that was FSB by then. The KGB was long since dissolved. Mm-hmm. But I had to get approval because I had SCI level clearances to do this, and I got them.
And they approved it.
You bet.
What did you think of the Russian remote viewing project? Was it more advanced than us? Did they come farther along?
I talked to Victor. Victor Rubel was in the Red Army. He's now an American citizen and delightful man. And after Larissa passed away, he was my minder in Russia. And damn good at it. I mean, he was protecting me no matter what. But Victor said, the Russians never declassify anything. I mean, I've got a 40-minute video from Russia Gazeta company, which has it's probably the go-to newspaper for military issues. We were full front page cover on Angela and I there. And what happened is just rather astounding that I gave a talk in English and it was being translated into Russian, and I showed the example of this of Ingo's clay model of this radar site. That piece did not show up in the 40-minute video they published. Fortunately, I have a friend in the audience who sent me a video of that. So they're a little nervous about that. I had the same problem. I was giving a talk. I was invited with 4 other Westerners to go to Hong Kong on extrasensory perception stuff. Funded by a guy named Bingo Wu. That's his name. He's a very wealthy character. And the 5 Westerners were there, plus 100 young Chinese kids, I mean really kids, who were trained by Qigong masters with supposedly all kinds of psychic ability. And I eventually had to go up to Bingo Wu later, and I said, don't ever do that again. This is child abuse for these kids. Because they had to conform to the Western standards of activity. For example, they claimed to be able to put a matchstick in a jar, seal the jar, and then by psychokinesis break the matchstick. So because they sort of believe their own story, they said, Ed, you can make your own, here's a bottle, and you can put your own matchstick in there. So I wrote some stuff on my matchstick so I know it was my match, and I put it in there, and we could use clear wrapping tape to keep making sure that it wasn't opened. I then put some symbols on the bottom of the can to make sure it was my can. And this poor girl, she was probably 15 or 14, she had it in her forehead for 40 minutes, and nothing happened. And she was distraught. And fortunately, there was a guy there named Simon Huan, who was speaks totally fluent Chinese, but he's a British. He speaks English with a British accent because he was on the British government, a liaison on matters of trade with China. And I said, Simon, please comfort this girl for me, because I was not angry with her in the slightest. And eventually and so I have a picture of the three of us hugging each other. It was really sweet. And I went up to Bingo Wu and complained bitterly about it. But she could not do it, and she was distraught.
Did any of the kids accomplish that?
Nope. And one of the things that they had 100 kids, 100 of them, and they divided them into two teams on a basketball court. And all of we Westerners were sitting and watching this happen outside. And the idea is these blindfolded kids were going to throw a ball through a hoop. It wasn't a game of basketball. There was just free throw through the hoop. Except I got pictures I can show you from my computer. The kid's like this, looking through his blindfold. It's so completely, utterly obvious. But what the hell can we say? Nothing. One example they had there, and it was a teleportation thing. There were two boxes, one labeled the English letter A and the other box labeled English letter B. Very clever. They had an object in box A with a small TV camera in box A and a small TV camera in box B. And the idea is one of these Qigong kids would arrange, God knows how, to have the item in box A appear magically in box B, and it would be tape recorded by the video. Neat idea. Except the kid was left alone, not supervised while this was going on. And oddly enough, the two video cameras both quit working. Isn't that odd? Yeah, right. So the guy who ran all that said, and translated into English, we would like to offer you a job to come and direct our laboratories so we do this correctly. So one of those rare times that was my ethics were in good shape. Mm-hmm. I said, look, there are great scientists in China. You don't need an old guy from the West. Tell you what, if you'd like, I would help you pick the right person from China if you want me to do that. Simon came up to me and whispered in my ear. He said, Ed, I'd never let you take that job. Why? Because you'd like to leave China one day.
So it sounds like we were a lot more advanced, at least in their eyes.
Oh, in China for sure.
What were some of the similarities that you saw how the KGB or how the Russians were running their program versus Stargate?
They were not particularly open about it. They were pleasant.
So they were there to collect from you, not share.
Yeah.
What do you think about the number of remote viewers? I believe you said there was 120-something remote viewers as compared to what, our 6?
Well, we had... SRI only had about 5 or 6 at any given moment, and Fort Meade wasn't much better.
So we'll double that number, 12. They have 120. But I mean, you're talking about experiments that were done where the kid was left unsupervised, the cameras cut out. And
well, that's in China, yeah.
I'm guessing miraculously the
kid broke. Come on, it's obvious what happened.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, were we pickier, or had we just not found the amount that they had found yet?
What do you mean? I mean, we're not being picky. You'd never leave a participant ever alone with the apparatus. We never do.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I'm getting at. I guess what I'm getting at is, at the time, let's just say Would 12 be a fairly accurate number? 12 remote viewers that the U.S. had at the time.
Never at the same time. Correct.
1%.
Yeah.
So 12, less than 12 at any given particular time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And
only
Russia,
a few of them at Fort Meade. Joe McMoneagle and Angela Ford, maybe one other person produced actionable intelligence. The rest of them didn't.
So we're talking 3.
Maybe, yeah. Joe would be better off telling her, or Angela better yet.
Less than 10.
Yeah.
They have 120.
And
What
they
I'm
never
asking,
show us results. Not one result have I seen of their remote.
So that could have been total bogus.
Well, I did have a measure. Joe and I were there at the same time, and we got to do a joint remote viewing with Elena Klimova and Joe. She was the top Russian remote viewer. Mm-hmm. She was damn good. And I had control of that, so I know what was going on.
Same principles, same testing, same.
Just what we did here.
And they developed that on their own.
Well, I don't know about that, what they do when I'm not there. That was what I ran. I had control of everything. I don't know what they do on their own.
Oh, so they shared literally nothing.
They never share anything. And Victor said it's part of the zeitgeist of Russian military. They never declassify anything. And I didn't show them any classified stuff at all, period.
Very interesting. Going back to SRI, we're talking about, right now we're talking about remote viewing. Are there any other sensory, basically we're talking about non-lethal future type weapons, correct? So when it comes to remote viewing, were we researching anything else that maybe was similar to remote viewing that I don't know about?
Well, there's been a lot of efforts in the field at large, parapsychology field at large, to look at remote sensing of various kinds. Like, can you separate different categories of music, for example? Joe did his first remote viewing ever on camera called Put to the Test, and I have that video. That the ABC people sent a person who's a location scout for movie industry out to me for 2 days worth of training about how to pick sites. And then I was hands off after that, and she chose 6 sites around the Houston area. And it was done. The lawyers had control of it, so nobody could do anything, and so on. Long story short, Joe remote viewed it and nailed this site, which happened to have been a Houston channel, ocean channel for shipping. And right in the middle of the trial, a huge Russian vessel docked, right in the middle of the trial, where there was an outbound experimenter there, and Joe was back in the studio. But he nailed it. And he said, I hear loud noises from this thing. I have no idea what it is. There's something large there. I don't know what it is. Blew the mind of the interviewer who didn't buy the story to begin with. But I called up Joe, and he called me rather when it was all over. And I said, boy, congratulations. You did this remote viewing your first time ever on national television. How the hell do you do that? He said, you think I did remote viewing on national television? I wouldn't do that. I did it over breakfast before I went to the studio. Doesn't matter when you do it, You give yourself the tasking. They're going to do something. I'll figure it out. And then he faked it on camera.
Wow. Do you understand what I'm asking? Are we looking into anything that might be, remote viewing it's hard for people to believe. It's something that we still don't understand. And so what I'm asking is, are there other types of ESP that we're looking into other than remote viewing that I don't know about?
Well, I think other people, I mean, the fields, there are 300 members of the Parapsychological Association, and I think almost none of them are doing remote viewing.
What are some of the other things they're researching?
Well, there's the Gonsfeld, which is remote viewing like, but they're all psychologists. That's why it's called parapsychology.
Mm-hmm.
So they're interested in, what are the personality variables that make this person do good, or is someone who is really creative, does that affect the performance in the Gonsfeld, and so on and so on. Those kinds of questions. Yeah. They're not looking at mechanism. We're the only group that I know of that is looking at trying to figure out the mechanism, how this works. In fact, Ray Hyman, there's a joke. The two biggest critics, and this is their true names, Hyman and Alcock. I swear to God, they're the critics of this field. But Ray Hyman I think he's still alive, a psychologist from the University of Oregon. I know the guy pretty well. And they formed an organization called PsyCops, the Committee to Investigate the Scientific Claims of the Paranormal. It's no longer that name. It's just called Skeptical Inquirer. But PsyCops, Jessica Ott's an amazing statistician. She and I went to Buffalo at the 20th Congress of PsyCops. And Ray Hyman was giving a talk at the beginning, and he said to the assembled skeptics, do not underestimate parapsychologists. They are the best methodologists he's ever met. I went up to him after. I said, Ray, my God, took a lot of courage to do that. He said, yeah, but it's true. So even Ray, in front of those people, said, there are classes of things we no longer need any further evidence for its existence. What we should be focusing on now is how the hell does it actually work? And he's right.
When I interviewed a gentleman, John Alexander, and he was talking about spoon bending. He was talking about plants having consciousness. I mean, were you a part of any of that type of research?
None whatsoever. I would not be. Although there was a variation on it. Bev Humphrey and I went covertly undercover. There was a course on spoon bending up at Lake Tahoe in California.
Mm-hmm.
So before going up there, I bought some really heavy-duty soup spoons that had the handles looked like a Greek letter omega, which makes it damned hard to bend. Okay, so we get up there on a Friday night, and it's Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, as food, sleep, and logic deprivation, which turns out to be a big deal, so you don't get your head in it. And God help me, I'm going to tell you this. We're sitting with pyramids on our head underneath the big pyramid. And I tell people, if you put your bananas under your pyramid, it'll be sharp enough to shave with later on. And we got around to bending stuff at 2 a.m. Early in the morning on Monday. I don't remember what time. And I'm sitting on the floor cross-legged. My whole body is falling asleep from my hips down. And I'm weaving the tines of forks into little knots. Nope. So I have no idea what's going on there. I'm not in a shape to know what I'm doing or not. I was conscious enough that the guy running the show, I came by me and I reached in and grabbed one of our big spoons. And I said, can you bend this? He said, oh, yeah. And he wrapped it around, not the ball of the spoon, but this part of the spoon. So driving home, I said to Bev Humphrey was with me, I said, maybe we saw some genuine PK here. So got back to SRI, and one of the people on our projects, Gary Langford, is a metallurgist himself. He said, do you have any of those spoons left over? I said, oh, yeah, get me one. So he goes, does the same thing right in front of me. He says, it's shock deformation. That if you do that and you hesitate, it'll freeze on you. But if you just keep going, you can do it. I learned how to do it then. I can't do it anymore, but I was able to do it myself. Thus went away my belief that we saw genuine PK.
It's what What was it? Shock what?
Shock deformation.
And how does that work?
Well, you start it like that. And if you start it and stop, nothing will happen. If you start it and keep going, it's easy to bend. It will feel like rubber or something really smooth.
And these are metals.
Yeah.
Metal smooths.
Oh, you bet. These are the ones with the omega shape.
And he bent it.
Yeah.
And so, but there is a scientific explanation on how that happens.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you looked into that was similar to any of this?
No, that's the only weird stuff we ever looked into it. We didn't do healing because, what defines healing?
Healing.
Healing, helping sick people. And there are a lot of people doing that. For example, I was funded by an organization called the Samuel E. Institute in Alexandria, Virginia, run by a fellow that used to be part of NIH, alternative medical approach to medicine. And so he was looking at these odd new medical things, one of which was he funded a guy at Duke University who, I think it was Duke, in North Carolina, that guy by the name of Mitch Krukoff, very clever a heart specialist. And Mitch wanted to know, good question, what other things could he do to improve his ability to help heart patients? So he had, I forget how many other things they looked at, vitamin, exercise, diet, and so on, one of which was intercessory prayer, people praying for their well-being. And they did a 5-year study. They called it the Mantra Project. And sure enough, after all things said and done, they did what's called a factor analysis to figure out, was there anything in this mishmash of a whole bunch of stuff that mattered? And the answer is yes. The only thing that mattered was intercessory prayer. And so because Mitch is a well-known guy, he got a $750,000 grant from NIH to study intercessory prayer in terms of, does it actually help his patients? So it was pretty interesting because what I didn't know, if you get funded by NIH, you can't have randomization done by somebody in the project. So there's kind of a satellite companies around medical schools who do nothing but randomize participants into control and effort groups. They don't even care what the study is. Okay, so he did the study, and one of the funniest damn things, there were solid Christians who wouldn't do this because there were non-Christians praying for help, praying for their help. Oh, please, come on. Turned out it failed categorically. So I talked to Mitch Krukoff about it, and I said, that fits our model of decision augmentation, meaning that in the 5 years of you had your people with a bias in favor of this working, pressing the buttons to randomize your people, not cheating. Nobody, I'm not accusing anybody of cheating, but using unconscious ESP to sort patients in such a way it looks like it was a genuine effect, but it's not. And since this other group was doing the randomization, they didn't give a damn. No wonder it didn't work. And I think my bet is, 50 years from now, the only part of Psi, one major part of Psi that will survive is this decision augmentation model that we put together. And you should look up, you should get Jessica Utz to come here. She, I've known her for a really long time. Her name is Jessica Utz, U-T-T-S. She used to be head of the department in statistics department at UC Irvine. I can send you her contact for her. I'll do it.
I'll reach out.
Yeah, she is terrific. She has this ability to, she published a book called Seeing Through Statistics. And there's not one equation in the book. She wanted to have a book that people who read newspaper articles who mention statistics can get some idea what the hell they're talking about. And I said, hey, how come you have all these trees in the damn cover of your book? She says, think about it. Oh, seeing through the trees, the forests. Oh, please. She became, in 2016, the chief statistician in the whole damn country. She was head of the American Statistical Association, became chair of that. And I'll send you the link on my YouTube channel. She gave it the presidential address, which was 70 minutes long. 7 minutes of it was her ability to say in front of this collective body her belief in extrasensory perception and what she's done in that domain. I called her up and said, geez, you're brave. She says, no, I'm telling you the truth. And it's just a brilliant piece. And the introduction is longer than her talk in the 7-minute section. I thought I knew her really well. We were good friends and spent time at her house. And she and her longtime, not her husband, my common-law husband, if it were. And we, she said, it has to happen. Very, very impressive. That's real stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to...
she'd be good for you to interview.
Have a chat with her.
You bet.
That would be fascinating. So in 1995, it sounds like Stargate came to an end. What was the decision that led to that? Why did they end it?
Good question. That's a really good question. First of all, there was what's called a CDA, a Congressionally Directed Activity, that the Congress ordered the CIA to do a 20-year retrospective of this whole program. And if they felt that there was quality in this program, they were then to take over the program from DIA. Okay? And so they hired the American Institutes of Research to do the study. It's supposed to be a 20-year retrospective. And they produced what's called the AIR report, American Institutes of Research Reports, great big thick document. They wouldn't give me a copy of it. Okay. They gave Jessica a copy. They had Jessica and Ray Hyman as counters to each other, a skeptic and a believer. And I walked into Senator Cohen's office at the time. He was still senator. And I said, hey, I don't have a copy of the AIR report. He said, oh, here's mine. Take it. He then said, do you think you can refute this? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, write an article and pull no punches, which I did and got it published in the Journal of Parapsychology. Everything I said in that article was wrong. They only looked at 1 year over instead of 20. That was correct, but that's not why they closed the program down. And it wasn't until we had released by the CIA all the stuff, they said why the program closed. What happened was, and we have the quotes, and it's in Volume 4 of the Stargate Archives, that the Cold War was basically over. And the Congress was saying, we've got all this money going to the intel community. We don't need to have that much money anymore. So the Congress ordered CIA to slim down, get rid of all these small programs. And if you don't do that, they threaten to close the CIA, actually. Not our view. That's released by the CIA themselves. And I think the reason it closed is that we just were on the chopping block along with a whole bunch of other programs. Negating everything I said in my original paper.
Man. What do you think of that?
Well, when a guy from the Pentagon and I spent with Joe 10 years trying to get Stargate started again, the working stiffs and defense analysts and so on loved the product that we had, but upper management said no. And I think that's too bad, especially with terrorism these days. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm convinced that no way in hell are they doing it secretly.
You don't think so?
I do not. My clearances have all dissolved, so I don't really know.
Why do you think they're not doing this under a different name, on a different program?
Yeah. I hope they are doing it, but I don't think so, because was so much pushback. The only reason our program survived is we had a bunch of heroes. John Glenn was a hero. Senator Cohen was a hero. Two other people, and I can't remember their names right now. They protected us from the wolves who were trying to shut us down. And same thing happened with Porosavin in Russia. They tried to shut him down, and the head of the general staff was supporting it, so they couldn't close it down. People are terrified of this stuff. In fact, Charlie Tart wrote a whole book article rather, not a book, about the fear of psi. For example, if you really believed in telepathy, get out of my fucking head, man. I'm thinking about stuff that you have no business knowing what it should be. And people really get scared of that.
Do you believe in telepathy?
I believe that it's impossible. And the reason is this. You and I are going to do a telepathy experiment right now. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 1,000. What is it? Come on, out with it.
703.
I take my pistol, shoot myself in the head. I carry myself to the grave, knowing you got the right answer. Oops, I just told you got the right answer. So the question is, where did you get the information? Did you get it out of my mind or the feedback? The only way I can prevent it, the only way you could possibly get it out of my mind is to kill myself. But the minute you find the answer, if you have access, if there's an answer book, which there isn't when I'm dead, it's not an experiment anymore.
Please help me understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Because I'm not receiving it.
Okay.
You pick a number from 1 through 1,000. I say 703. You kill yourself. Why do you kill yourself?
Because if I say, you got it right, then the question is, from where did you get the information? Out of my mind or from the feedback you got later?
What feedback?
I told you the answer. You got it right. That's feedback. Yeah. If you were precognitive enough, you'd look into the future, you're getting a pat on the top of your head because you got the answer right. Whatever. The way to think about this, if you were in college and a scuzzball and you're having an important exam that is going to affect the rest of your life, so you sneak into the professor's office and there's an answer book in there from the questionnaire and you study it really carefully or maybe even photograph it, boy, you're going to do really well on the exam. Mm-hmm. Suppose you could do that precognitively. You're going to do really well on the psychic exam, so to speak. In fact, we use that terminology in our writing, peeking into the answer book. If a study does not have an answer, it's not a study. Now, the answer may not be what you want. It may be different than what you want, but there is some result, and the result we consider as the answer book, and you have access to that by precognition. That, in fact, Sonali and I wrote a paper together collapsing the problem space of informational psi, people getting information by psychic means.
So are you saying I looked into the future to get 703, saw you tell me,
Yep.
Good job,
Yep.
Came back,
Yep.
Said the number?
Yep. Now, if I'd kill myself, you never get that. Now, we didn't invent this kind of stuff. I mean, we concretized it by doing the arithmetic and all the stuff that you need to do to make sure that it's real. It simplifies things. Precognition simplifies the whole game. And we don't know how to stop looking into the future. You could say, well, I'm getting it from direct. Well, how do you know? You don't know that. The big mystery is how the hell the information gets there in the first place. For example, Sonali in India is going to generate from a collection of photographs, one photograph tomorrow, but you're going to remote view it today. How the hell does that work? And it turns out we figured out to divide the problem space into two and a half actually. Problem space number one, how does that information get from India tomorrow to right here today? That is 100% a physics problem. doesn't depend upon my nose or me or you or anybody. It's a physics problem, and they worry about it. In fact, there's even a whole discipline supported by the American Institute of Physics called quantum retrocausation. It is possible for information to go backward in time from the future to the present, but the present cannot go backward in time to the past. Don't worry about why that's the case, but it's true.
I want to know why that's the case.
Because the past it's quantum mechanics. The system has already been measured. It's collapsed. The state vector has collapsed. But you can't undo
what's been done.
What's been done. But until it's been done, it can influence the present. Now, that doesn't mean that's the way it works, but at least it's a plausibility argument, how the physics domain. There's a guy in physics department, of Amsterdam, in university there, called Eric Verlinde. And he said we should throw away gravity as a force. It's not a force, which it isn't. It's geometry. And there's a real problem with gravity. There's no quantum base to it. So that's, of the four basic forces, that's the only one that doesn't have a quantum mechanical base. So let's get rid of that and talk about entropy. And he derived Einstein field equations, Newton's equations, and all the stuff of physics based on entropy. And I want to go talk to this guy because if it's an entropic force, then there's a carrier. The problem is everything that we know about and getting information that can be used has a carrier associated with it. You are listening to me and getting information because the carrier is the sound waves going to your eardrums. If you have an alarm clock going off in a vacuum chamber, you can't hear it. So we need some carrier right now, and we have no idea what it might be of information coming backward in time. But Verlinde has an idea that might be worthy of thought. So that's half the problem, let alone how it gets into your brain. But once it's in the brain, oh, by the way, the physics people can worry about and not care about extrasensory perception. That's a physics problem. All right, once it's in the brain, leave aside how it got there for a moment. Then it's a neuroscience problem. They don't give a damn how it got there. And the article we wrote, working with the Brazilian folks, this is testable about hyperconductivity in the brain and the white matter and so on, blah, 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 all this technical stuff. It's testable. Might be wrong, but at least it's testable. The problem is what transfers whatever this is coming in into something the brain can recognize. We know about retinas in our eyes. We know about the sensory systems in our nose and so on, but we don't know a psychic retina, so to speak, for remote viewing.
What do you think it is?
No idea. I really have no idea.
I mean, you don't lose sleep at night thinking about this?
Oh, I think about it all the time.
You don't have theories?
I'm not smart enough. I'm not a theorist. That's the problem. You figure it out, I'll test it. It's very difficult. Well, what we're hoping for, and that's why we're taking Angela to do what's called a case study, just her, mushing her hand to an MRI machine. If we are lucky, I mean really lucky, her brain will be different, quantitatively different than large number of base brains that they look at. Highly unlikely that it will be. But if it is different, then we can say, well, it's different because of this, that, and the other thing. That gives us a clue of how to see whether we can find psychics that way.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, big time. We're not counting on it by any stretch. A better approach to find subjects is to get involved in the synesthesia community, because since I mentioned over breakfast that all of our participants have synesthesia.
What is that?
That's where you get crosstalk in your sensory systems. You see black and white things in color, and so on. It's crosstalk of your sensory systems.
We spoke about this at the beginning. We spoke about that when you hear music and feel it in your... Okay. Yeah. Okay. Man, it's almost like there's some type of unknown organ that's at work that's receiving that information, just like your nose, ears, eyes, mouth,
Well,
touch.
probably it's going to be more distributed than that. In fact, the only thing that I'm aware of, and I could be wrong on this one, that the Russians are big on identifying each part of the brain as associated with some behavior, and that's simply not true, with one exception. That is, there's a very small part of our brain which is dedicated to face recognition. And Russell Targ, for example, that part is not functioning for him. He can go to a party with his wife and not recognize her from other tall, similar women because he cannot recognize her face. The same with me. So if we're meeting for lunch, he'll hear my voice. I'll say, "Hey, Russ, good to see you again." At least he knows it's me. And that's a very standard problem. Some people have this, that for reasons unknown, that part of their brain is not functioning properly. So I don't expect a little chunk over here for consciousness, another little chunk over here for liking salt. Seriously, this conversation with you has inspired me to maybe not resign and quit. It's too much fun.
Keep going. Keep going. With everything that you've studied and are there any key things that make you believe everything that you've studied, over the course of 49 years?
It's not an event. It's collectiveness, the whole thing. I mean, for me, it's self-evident of the number of successes in the operational work. We're not cheating with that, and there are skeptical people in your business looking at this and, hey, we want to come back with more study. I mean, even the CIA came back with us 41 times with new missions. They wouldn't do that if it weren't useful to them.
After it was shut down?
No, before it was shut down.
Before.
Yeah. So, no, it's more the collective thing. For me, probably the most convincing evidence is that 17 of the 19 end users came back with wanting more stuff. Now we can go to statistics, and Jessica Utz will bore you to tears on the statistics, but nobody buys statistics.
Why bother?
Good question. I've thought a lot about that because, I've put a lot of effort in, so a lot of colleagues around. I mean, I don't want to give the impression I'm the only guy doing this. I'm not by any stretch. I guess I'm relying on Chuck Honerton's view of that, and I tend to agree with it, that we humans are faced with really interesting questions about, do we survive our deaths, for example? Everybody's interested in that, including me. Can I have a brief comment on that before I go a little further? I was invited to be a participant at the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture in Kolkata, India. I was the resident materialist of the bunch. And long story short, there was one of their monks was beating up on me and saying that there's something called promissory materialism. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. You're right. I can't write down an equation for love, but I promise you by next Thursday at 2 p.m, well, maybe 1,000 years from next Tuesday, we'll have an answer, right? But so he started defending me on that, promissory materialism. And he was a bright guy, totally fluent in English and in PowerPoint useful. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, Swamiji, your whole philosophy, I love much better than mine, that you survive your death and you get to do all this other stuff. I wish that were true. Mine is last breath and that's it. And I said, but you have to modernize. You're basing it on philosophy that's 3,000 years old. And that was before we knew about brains and about genetics and all that good stuff. He said, you have to modernize that. And we worked for about 5 years together, he and I, over the net, over wasn't Zoom in those days, email, to try to figure out ways in which to modernize this. And we figured out he couldn't do it. So it remains in the realm of philosophy. At least he was interested in it, and so was I. So that was a side step. But you asked me why do it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think humans, including me, want to know the answers to these more spiritually oriented questions. Do we actually survive our death? Or better yet, how do we communicate with one another? We need to do a hell of a lot better job than we're doing now, for sure. And things of that nature. What is consciousness? Is Tononi right about consciousness? And all of those questions, maybe psi research as it currently exists may not answer those questions, but at least it's no new tools in the toolbox that someone later on will be able to use them and help them answer those questions.
What do you think consciousness is?
I think it's an emergent property of our brain. Straightforward. And Tononi, I buy Tononi's story tremendously. I will send you a link to that book, by the way. You should get it. It's fabulous.
Thank you. Edwin, we're wrapping up the interview, and with all the stuff that you've been involved with and all your studies outside of remote viewing, what do you think we should be looking into?
As humans, you mean?
Is there anything that's come across your radar that you think that has to do with the subject?
Oh, okay.
It could be totally random, but what I'm asking, when it comes to ESP, human sensory, what haven't we touched? What do people not know about? What should we be looking into?
That's a good question. I mean, if I knew what we haven't touched, I'd go touch it. Mm-hmm. I'm more concerned politically where we're at as a culture, not only our country, but similar countries around the world. And that's a big threat to everybody. And this stuff's not going to help that at all, I don't think. But that to me is a bigger worry for me at the moment.
I think that's a worry for a lot of us.
No kidding.
Well, Ed, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. It was far more interesting than I thought it would be, to tell you the truth.
Oh, man, I could go on here, but...
How long have we been at this?
We've been going for about 5 hours now.
Oh, geez.
So, in between 4 and 5 hours.
Doesn't feel that way at all, actually.
Goes by quick, doesn't it? Mm. But is there anything that I should be asking you that I haven't asked so far?
What do I do for fun? That's
what
important.
do you do for fun?
Well, I used to play a lot of golf. I'm horrible at it, but I still like to play it. My wife tricked me into it, damn it. Because I said, I'm not a Republican. I don't own one pair of checker pants. Buzz off. So she conned me into it, carrying her clubs one day. And I said, oh, geez. And you're a physicist. Trouble is, being a physicist and knowing about golf, those are incompatible. You should not worry about in your head what's happening to the ball and how it's going to... No. The other thing is I do a lot of walking in the San Francisco Bay Area. Long distances, 11 miles at a crack.
That's pretty amazing for... Can I say your age?
Yeah, of course.
An 83-year-old man. You look...
No, you screwed it. 84.
84?
Yeah.
Oh, man. We are in amazing health.
No, I'm on my 84th trip around the sun. I've been there. It's boring. Same old sun.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
With all of the remote viewing and I've listened to... I researched Joe for a long time before he finally came out here, and there was a lot of stuff when it comes to outer space, are we alone, that kind of stuff. What do you think about that? Are we alone?
Well, who is it? I forget the long since dead philosopher, or semi-philosopher. He said his view was we're serially alone, which is pretty interesting. And the way he worded that was, we've been only to announce ourselves as a species to outer space since the invention of radio. So if there are other critters out there, and the probability of critters being there is virtually unity. If you look at the total number of, the number of galaxies, the number of stars in each galaxy, and the number of planets that are M-class planets like the Earth, I mean, the probability that there's life elsewhere is, in my view, damn near unity, for sure. Now, whether we'll be able to meet it is another question. But Carl Sagan, and what he said was we're serially alone, because in the years that it's been, 150 years since we had radio, and intelligent species like we are going to put ourselves out of business very quickly with global warming. We're going to kill ourselves off. So give us 1,000 years from the invention of a radio. The next 1,000 years, we'll all be gone. He says that's inherent to other species as well. So what's the probability of two 1,000-year chunks in 5 billion years? It's very small that they'll overlap. Pretty interesting argument. Whether it's true or not, who the hell knows?
That is an interesting argument. I've never thought of it like that.
Because we are, no one's paying, we are very serious. I wrote my first scientific paper in the Journal of Geophysical Research in 1962 on upper atmospheric heating by high altitude water vapor. And we even knew then that we are in a climate shift. We had no idea back then, that as humans were involved in it. Now there's no question.
Well, thank you.
I won't be around long enough to know whether we're burning ourselves up.
Well, Edwin, I just want to say it was an honor to interview you and sit here and have this conversation. And
the honor is returned to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Very happy that we met, and I just wish you the best. Thank you so much. When I'm doing research for the show, booking travel, or communicating with guests, I always browse the web incognito. But did you know incognito mode is not enough to hide your browsing history? All your online activity is still visible to tons of third parties unless you use ExpressVPN. Without ExpressVPN, you're vulnerable. ExpressVPN is the best on the market because it reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers, and it's easy to use on all your devices. Fire up the app and click one button to get protected. It's even rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. In my line of work, online security is paramount, and that's why I choose ExpressVPN. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Shawn. That's expressvpn.com/Shawn. And you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/Shawn. No matter where you're watching Shawnryanshow from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.